The outcast who broke an empire. In a brutal northern citadel where rejection meant death, Rhea Varen, the weakest wolf in the pack, was discarded by the Alpha King in front of thousands. She should have died. Instead, something impossible happened. 3 of the king's most feared generals felt their world shatter as a new bond formed, one that shouldn't exist. That single moment turned a rejected runt into the most dangerous threat the kingdom had ever seen. This is her story. Stay until the end to see how she destroys a tyrant and rebuilds everything. Drop a comment with your city if you're watching, and smash that like button. The rain came down like punishment. It hammered the black stone courtyard of Thornhold Citadel, turning the ground into a slick mirror that reflected nothing but gray sky and the faces of thousands who had come to witness what they thought would be a celebration. Instead, they got something else entirely. Rhea Varen stood in the center of it all, soaked to the bone, shivering not from cold, but from the weight of every eye on her. Her dark hair clung to her face in wet strands, and her thin frame looked even smaller under the heavy fur cloak someone had thrown over her shoulders hours ago. It didn't help. Nothing helped. She could smell them, all of them. Fear, disgust, anticipation. The crowd pressed in from all sides, a wall of bodies that stretched from the citadel gates to the base of the stone platform where the Alpha King stood. Darius Thorn. He was massive, even by wolf standards, broad-shouldered, scarred, with eyes like winter steel, and a presence that made grown men step back without thinking. His dark coat was lined with silver thread, and his boots were polished despite the rain. He didn't need to shout to command attention, he just was. And right now he was looking at Rhea like she was a mistake. "Step forward," he said. His voice cut through the rain and the murmuring crowd. Not loud, just absolute. Rhea's legs didn't want to move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear into the forest beyond the walls and never come back. But there was nowhere to go. The citadel was surrounded by wild lands, territories filled with rogues, exiles, and things worse than wolves. Running meant dying alone. Staying meant dying here. She stepped forward. The crowd went silent. Darius descended from the platform, each step deliberate, each movement calculated to remind everyone watching who held the power. When he reached her, he stopped, close enough that she could see the rainwater rolling off his jaw, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You are Rhea Varen," he said. Not a question. "Yes, my king." Her voice sounded small. She hated it. "You were marked as my mate 3 weeks ago by the Elder Council. They believed the bond would strengthen the bloodline." He paused, and something cold flickered across his face. "They were wrong." The words hit her like a fist. She'd known it was coming. Of course she'd known. From the moment the council had announced the pairing, she'd seen the doubt in their eyes, the whispers that followed her through the halls. She was too small, too weak, too wrong. But hearing it spoken aloud, in front of everyone, was different. "I reject you, Rhea Varen." The bond snapped. It didn't ease away or fade gently. It shattered. A violent, wrenching tear that started in her chest and spread outward like broken glass, cutting through every nerve. She gasped, her knees buckling, and the world tilted sideways. She hit the ground hard. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Others muttered prayers. A few just watched, waiting to see if she'd die right there in the mud. Rejection was supposed to be fatal. When an alpha severed a mate bond, the weaker wolf's body couldn't survive the shock. It was biology. It was law. It was the way things had always been. Rhea's vision blurred, her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The pain was everywhere, burning through her veins, tearing her apart from the inside. And then, something pulled. Not from Darius, not from the bond he'd just destroyed, from somewhere else. 3 points of heat flared to life in her chest, sharp and sudden, like hooks sinking into her ribs. She gasped again, this time in shock rather than pain, and her eyes snapped open. 3 men stood at the edge of the platform, just behind the king. Generals, the king's enforcers, the wolves who carried out his orders without question and crushed rebellion before it could take root. Kyle Draven, tall, lean, with ash-blonde hair tied back and a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His hand was pressed against his chest, and his face had gone pale. Brig Hale, built like a landslide, all muscle and barely contained violence. He was gripping the stone railing so hard it cracked under his fingers, his dark eyes wide with something that looked like panic. Soren Vale, quiet, deadly, with black hair and the kind of face that gave nothing away. He stood perfectly still, but his hand had moved to the knife at his belt, knuckles white. All three of them were staring at her, not at the king, not at the crowd, at her. Rhea didn't understand. She could barely think past the pain, but she could feel it. 3 new threads winding through her chest, bright and burning and impossible. Bonds. Not 1. 3. The king noticed. Of course he did. He turned, his expression shifting from cold indifference to something darker. Confusion, then anger. What is this? His voice was low, dangerous. Kael spoke first, his voice tight. I don't... He stopped, shook his head. It's not supposed to, I feel it too, Brig rumbled. His hand was still on the railing, and his breathing had gone rough. What the hell is she? Soren said nothing, but his eyes never left Rhea. The crowd was murmuring now, louder, confusion spreading like wildfire. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Rejection meant death. It didn't mean this. Darius stepped toward his generals, his voice dropping to a growl. Explain! Kael looked like he was going to be sick. I can feel her, like a bond, but not like anything I've felt before. It's... He pressed his hand harder against his chest. It's pulling. Me too, Brig said. His voice was rough, almost a snarl. It's like she's inside, in my head. Soren finally spoke, his tone flat but edged with something Rhea couldn't name. She's connected to all of us. The king's jaw tightened. He turned back to Rhea, and for the first time she saw something other than disdain in his eyes. Fear. Kill her, he said. The words were simple, final. Kael flinched. My king? Kill her, now. Brig moved first. He stepped forward, his hand going to the blade at his hip, but his movements were slow, uncertain, like he was fighting himself with every step. Rhea tried to scramble back, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The pain from the rejected bond was still tearing through her, and the new connections pulsing in her chest only made it worse. She couldn't stand, couldn't run. She was going to die. But then Soren was there, stepping between her and Brig, his hand on the bigger man's chest. No, Soren said quietly. Brig stopped. His eyes narrowed. Move. No. The crowd went dead silent. Kael was frozen on the platform, staring at the scene unfolding below. His hand had moved to his sword, but he didn't draw it. Darius's voice cut through the rain like a blade. You dare defy me? Soren didn't look at the king. He kept his eyes on Brig. I don't know what this is, but killing her won't break it. It'll make it worse. You don't know that, Brig growled. Neither do you. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Darius laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound that made Rhea's skin crawl. So, the king said, his voice dripping with contempt. My own generals, bound to a runt. He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. Do you see? This is what happens when weakness is allowed to breathe. It spreads. It infects. He gestured to the guards stationed around the courtyard. Take her. Lock her in the lower cells. No food, no water, no light. Let the bond starve with her. 2 guards moved forward immediately, grabbing Rhea by the arms and hauling her to her feet. She didn't fight. She couldn't. As they dragged her toward the citadel's entrance, she caught one last glimpse of the 3 generals. Kael looked stricken. Brig was breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. Soren's face was unreadable, but his eyes followed her every step. And then the heavy iron doors slammed shut, and she was gone. The cell was exactly as the king had promised. No light, no warmth, no sound except the drip of water somewhere in the dark. Rhea sat with her back against the cold stone wall, her knees pulled to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible. It didn't help. Nothing helped. The rejected bond was still there, a jagged wound in her chest that wouldn't stop bleeding. But beneath it, woven through the pain, were the 3 new threads. She could feel them even now, faint, distant, but real. Kael's was sharp and restless, like a blade being sharpened over and over. Brig's was heavy, a slow-burning fire that never quite went out. Soren's was the quietest, a steady pulse that felt like a heartbeat just slightly out of sync with her own. She didn't understand it, didn't know what it meant or why it had happened. But she knew one thing for certain: the king would never let her live long enough to find out. Time became meaningless in the dark. Minutes bled into hours, hours into something longer that her mind couldn't track. Her body screamed for water, for food, for anything. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. Her fingers trembled when she tried to move them. The three bonds pulsed in her chest like distant drums. Sometimes they flared bright, flooding her with emotions that weren't hers: rage, confusion, something that felt like grief. Other times they dimmed until she thought they might disappear entirely. She wondered if the generals felt the same thing, if they were somewhere in the citadel, feeling her pain, her thirst, her slow collapse into nothing. She hoped they were suffering. No, that wasn't fair. They hadn't asked for this any more than she had, but they'd served Darius for years. They'd enforced his laws, crushed his enemies, stood by while he turned the citadel into a place where the weak were discarded like trash. They were complicit in everything he'd built, and now they were tied to her. The irony would have been funny if she weren't dying. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Heavy boots on stone. Rhea didn't bother lifting her head. Probably another guard coming to check if she was dead yet. She'd stopped reacting to them after the first day, or what she thought was the first day. The door didn't open. Instead, a voice spoke from the other side, low, familiar. "You still alive in there?" "Brig." Rhea's eyes snapped open, though there was nothing to see. "What do you want?" "To know if you're still breathing." "Why? So you can report back to your king?" A pause. Then, "He's not my king anymore." That got her attention. She pushed herself up straighter, ignoring the way her vision swam. "What?" "The bond," Briggs said. His voice was rough, frustrated. "It's getting stronger. Every hour that passes, it digs deeper. Kyle can barely sleep, Soren won't eat, and He stopped. "I can feel you dying." "Good." "Is it?" Rhea didn't answer. "Listen," Briggs continued. "I don't know what you are. I don't know why this happened, but the king's going to kill you at dawn. He's already given the order." "I know. And you're just going to sit there?" "What else is there?" "Fight." She laughed. It came out as a dry rasp that hurt her throat. "Fight? I can't even stand." "Then we'll carry you." Rhea went still. "We?" Another voice spoke from the corridor. "Kyle, the three of us. We're getting you out." "Why would you do that?" "Because," Soren said quietly, joining the other two, "if you die, we die. The bond doesn't break with death. It drags us down with you." Of course. Self-preservation. She should have known. "So you need me alive," Rhea said. "For now," Kyle admitted, "but that's not the only reason." "What's the other reason?" Silence. Then Briggs spoke again. "Because what he did to you was wrong, and maybe we're tired of pretending it wasn't." The words hung in the dark. Rhea wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that somewhere underneath the loyalty and the violence and the years of service, these men had a conscience. But belief was dangerous. Hope was dangerous. "When?" she asked. 2 hours before dawn," Kyle said. "There's a shift change then. We'll have a window." "And if we're caught?" "Then we die fighting," Soren said simply. Rhea closed her eyes. 2 hours. That was all the time she had to decide if she wanted to keep living. She thought about the citadel, the cold stone walls, the people who'd laughed when she fell, the king who'd thrown her away like she was nothing. She thought about the wild lands beyond the gates, the rogues, the exiles, the things with teeth and claws that hunted in the dark. She thought about dying here, alone, forgotten. 2 hours, she said. The footsteps retreated. Rhea sat in the dark and waited. They came exactly when they said they would. The door opened, and Kyle was there, a small lamp in one hand and a water skin in the other. He crouched down, holding the skin to her lips. "Slow," he said. "If you drink too fast, you'll be sick." Rhea wanted to gulp it down, to drown herself in it, but she forced herself to take small sips. The water was cold and tasted like metal, and it was the best thing she'd ever experienced. When she'd had enough, Kale pulled the skin away and studied her face. "Can you walk?" "I don't know." "Try." She tried. Her legs shook and her vision blurred, but she managed to get upright. Brig appeared beside her, his hand steady under her elbow. "Lean on me," he said. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she could do it herself. But she couldn't, so she leaned. Soren was waiting in the corridor, his eyes scanning both directions. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before the next patrol. Move." They moved. The Citadel was a maze of passages and stairwells, most of which Rhea had never seen. The generals guided her through servant corridors and forgotten halls, always listening, always watching. They passed a window, and Rhea caught a glimpse of the courtyard below. Empty now. The rain had stopped, but the stone was still wet, still dark. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "East Gate," Kael said. "It's the least guarded." "Why?" "Because it opens onto the worst part of the wildlands. No one uses it." "Great." They descended another stairwell, this one narrow and steep. Rhea's legs nearly gave out halfway down, but Brig caught her before she fell. "Almost there," he muttered. The east gate was smaller than she'd expected, just a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron, set into the outer wall. 2 guards stood watch, their backs to the corridor. Soren moved first. He was fast, faster than Rhea would have thought possible. One moment he was beside her, the next he was behind the first guard, his knife against the man's throat. "Don't," Soren said quietly. The guard froze. The second guard reached for his sword, but Kael was already there, slamming him into the wall hard enough to crack stone. The man slumped, unconscious. Soren looked at the first guard. "Open the door. Then run. Don't look back." The guard's hand shook as he pulled the heavy bolt free and pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The guard ran. Soren stepped through the door first, scanning the area beyond. Kael followed, then Brig, half carrying Rhea. The wildlands stretched out before them, dark and endless under a sky just beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. "Once we cross," Kael said, "there's no going back. Darius will send hunters. They won't stop until we're dead or dragged back in chains." Brig looked at Rhea. "Your call." She stared at the forest, at the shadows between the trees, at the unknown waiting just beyond the tree line. Then she looked back at the Citadel, at the walls that had caged her, at the place that had tried to kill her. "Let's go," she said. They stepped into the wild. Behind them, the alarm bells began to ring. The forest swallowed them whole. Trees towered overhead, their branches tangled so thick that even the growing dawn light barely penetrated. The ground was soft with moss and fallen needles, muffling their footsteps, but Rhea could hear other sounds, rustling in the underbrush, the distant cry of something that wasn't quite a bird. Her legs were giving out. She'd pushed herself as far as she could, but her body was shutting down. The water Kael had given her helped, but it wasn't enough. She needed food, rest, time. "Stop!" she gasped. Brig stopped immediately. "What's wrong?" "I can't." She doubled over, her hands on her knees, trying to breathe. "I need to stop." Kael looked back the way they'd come. "We're too close. They'll have dogs. They'll track us." "I don't care. I can't." "Then I'll carry you." Before she could protest, Brig scooped her up like she weighed nothing. She wanted to argue, to insist she could walk, but the truth was she couldn't. So she let him. They kept moving, faster now, pushing deeper into the forest. The sounds around them grew louder, more aggressive. Rhea caught glimpses of eyes in the shadows, yellow, feral, watching. "Rogues," Soren said quietly. "How many?" Kael asked. "At least a dozen, maybe more." Brig's grip on Rhea tightened. "They'll attack. Not if we keep moving." But Soren was wrong. The first rogue lunged from the trees without warning, a gray blur of teeth and claws. Kael met it head on, his blade flashing. The rogue yelped and fell, dead before it hit the ground. 3 more came from the left. Soren moved like smoke, his knife finding throats and hearts with brutal efficiency. Brig set Rhea down behind a tree. "Stay here." Then he shifted. Rhea had seen wolves before, pack wolves, Citadel wolves, but nothing like this. Briggs' wolf form was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with dark fur and eyes that burned like coals. He hit the nearest rogue with enough force to snap its spine, then tore into another without pausing. Kale shifted next, his wolf lean and scarred, moving with a vicious grace that made the rogues hesitate. Soren didn't shift. He stayed human, his blade moving in precise, lethal arcs. The fight lasted maybe 2 minutes. When it was over, 8 rogues lay dead, and the forest had gone silent. Kael shifted back first, breathing hard. We need to keep moving. That noise will draw more. Briggs shifted back too, blood streaking his arms. He reached for Rhea. Can you walk now? She nodded, even though it was a lie. They kept going. The forest seemed endless. Every direction looked the same, trees and shadows and the constant sense of being watched. Rhea's awareness of the 3 bonds grew stronger with every step. She could feel Kael's adrenaline still coursing through him, could sense Briggs' controlled aggression, could taste Soren's cold focus. It was overwhelming, invasive, like having 3 extra voices in her head that wouldn't shut up. How much farther? She asked. To where? Kael said. Wherever we're going. We don't have a destination, Soren admitted. Just away. Great, they walked for hours. The sun climbed higher, though Rhea could barely see it through the canopy. Her legs moved on pure stubbornness now, 1 foot in front of the other, her vision tunneling. She didn't realize she'd stopped until Briggs' hand was on her shoulder. Rhea? She blinked. They were in a clearing, small and ringed with ancient trees. A stream cut through the center, the water clear and fast-moving. Drink, Kael said, kneeling beside the stream. Then we rest. Rhea stumbled to the water and dropped to her knees, cupping her hands and drinking until her stomach hurt. The cold shocked her system, but it cleared her head. Briggs was watching the tree line, his posture tense. We can't stay long. Long enough, Soren said. He was crouched beside a fallen log, his knife out, eyes scanning the forest. Kael sat down heavily, running a hand through his hair. We need a plan. The plan was get her out, Briggs said. That was step 1. What's step 2? Survive. And after that? Briggs didn't answer. Rhea sat back on her heels, staring at the 3 men who'd just thrown away everything to save her life. They looked exhausted, lost, and they were tied to her. She could feel the bonds even now, thrumming in her chest, connecting her to each of them in ways she didn't understand. Why did you really do it? She asked. All 3 of them looked at her. The truth, she pressed, not because you'll die if I die. Not because you felt guilty. Why? Kael spoke first. Because I've spent 10 years following orders I knew were wrong. And when I saw you on the ground, dying, I realized I was tired of being the kind of man who just watches. But Briggs was next. Because my whole life, I've been told that strength is the only thing that matters. That the weak deserve what they get. But you weren't weak. You survived something that should have killed you, and then you kept going. That's not weakness. Soren was last. His voice was quiet. Because I looked at you and saw myself. Thrown away. Discarded. Left to die. And I remembered what it felt like. The words settled in the clearing like stones dropping into water. Rhea didn't know what to say. So she didn't say anything. She just sat there, feeling the bonds pulse in her chest, and for the first time since the rejection, she didn't feel completely alone. A howl echoed through the forest, distant but getting closer. Hunters, Soren said, standing. How many? Kael asked. At least 20, maybe more, Briggs cursed. We can't outrun them, not with her in this condition. Then we fight, Kael said. Against 20 trained hunters, we'll die. Better than going back in chains. Rhea stood, her legs shook, but she forced herself upright. There's another option. All 3 of them looked at her. You said the bond is getting stronger, she said. That you can feel me. What if it goes both ways? Kael frowned. What are you suggesting? I don't know, but if we're connected, maybe I can... She stopped, searching for the words. Maybe I can do something with it. Like what? I have no idea. Another howl. Closer now. Soren's jaw tightened. We're out of time. Rhea closed her eyes. She focused on the 3 bonds in her chest, the threads connecting her to Kyle and Brig and Soren. She could feel them clearly now, bright, burning, alive. She pulled. All three men gasped. The bonds flared, flooding her with their strength, their speed, their raw power. It poured into her like fire, too much, too fast, overwhelming every sense. Her eyes snapped open, and they were glowing. "What the hell?" Kyle started. Rhea felt her body shift. Not into a wolf, into something else. Something between. Her senses sharpened, her muscles coiled, her heartbeat slowed. The hunters burst into the clearing, 20 wolves in full form, teeth bared, ready to kill. Rhea smiled. And then she moved. She moved like lightning. The first hunter didn't even see her coming. One moment he was charging across the clearing, the next Rhea's hand was around his throat, lifting him off the ground. The wolf yelped, thrashing, but her grip didn't falter. She threw him into a tree hard enough to crack the trunk. He didn't get up. The other hunters hesitated, confused. This wasn't the dying runt they'd been sent to retrieve. This was something else. Rhea could feel the power coursing through her veins. Kyle's speed, Brig's raw strength, Soren's lethal precision. It burned, almost too much to contain, but she held it together through sheer force of will. Two hunters lunged from opposite sides. She spun, catching one by the scruff and using his momentum to slam him into the other. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fur. "Rhea!" Kale's voice cut through the chaos. "You're going to burn out!" He was right. She could feel it already. The power was too much, too volatile. Her body wasn't built for this. Every second she held the connection was like holding fire in her bare hands, but she couldn't stop. Not yet. 3 more hunters came at her as a unit, coordinated, experienced. She met them head on, moving faster than thought, her fists and feet finding targets with brutal efficiency. Bones cracked, blood sprayed. The hunters fell. Behind her, Kale, Brig, and Soren had shifted, engaging the rest of the pack. The clearing erupted into violence, teeth and claws and the wet sound of flesh tearing. Rhea caught a flash of movement to her left. She turned just in time to see a massive gray wolf launching at her throat. Too close. Too fast. She couldn't dodge. But Soren could. He appeared between them, still in human form, his blade flashing. The wolf's momentum carried it past Rhea, and it hit the ground hard, dead before it stopped moving. Soren didn't even look at her. Focus. Don't waste the power. Rhea gritted her teeth and pulled harder on the bonds. Kale's wolf tore through 2 hunters at once, his movements almost too fast to track. Brig's massive form crushed another beneath his weight, his jaws closing around its throat. The hunters broke. The remaining wolves scattered into the forest, their howls fading into the distance. The clearing went silent except for the sound of heavy breathing and the stream still flowing, indifferent to the carnage. Rhea released the bonds. The power snapped back like a rubber band, and she collapsed. Her knees hit the ground, and she would have fallen on her face if Brig hadn't caught her. He'd shifted back, blood streaking his bare chest, his hands steady as he lowered her to the ground. "Easy," he said. "Just breathe." She tried. Her whole body was shaking, her muscles spasming from the overload. It felt like she'd been torn apart and put back together wrong. Kale crouched beside her, still catching his breath. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," Rhea gasped. "I just pulled, and it worked." "You almost killed yourself," Soren said flatly. He was cleaning his blade on a patch of moss, his expression unreadable. "Your body can't handle that much power." "It worked, didn't it? This time. Next time, you might not be so lucky." Rhea wanted to argue, but she didn't have the energy. Every part of her hurt. Her vision kept blurring at the edges, and her heart was beating too fast, too irregular. Brig's hand was on her shoulder. "We need to move. Those hunters will report back. Darius will send more." "Let them come," Rhea muttered. "You can barely stand." "I'll manage." But when she tried to stand, her legs gave out completely. Brig caught her again, his expression tight with concern. "You're done," he said. "No arguments." He lifted her like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Rhea wanted to protest, to insist she could walk, but the truth was she couldn't even keep her eyes open. "There's a place," Soren said quietly. "Old outpost. 3 miles north. If it's still standing, we can rest there." "If?" Kyle said. "It's been abandoned for 20 years. But it's the only option. Kale looked at Rhea, then at Brig. Fine, but we move fast. No stops. They moved. Rhea drifted in and out of consciousness as Brig carried her through the forest. She caught fragments, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant cry of something hunting, Kael's low voice saying something she couldn't quite hear. The bonds pulsed in her chest, weaker now, but still there. She could feel the exhaustion radiating from all three men, the physical toll of the fight layered over the constant pull of the connection. They were tired, hurt, running on fumes. Because of her, the thought made her stomach twist. She'd done this. She'd dragged them into this mess, turned them into fugitives, made them abandon everything they'd known. And for what? So she could live a few more days before her body gave out completely? Stop thinking so loud, Brig muttered. Rhea's eyes fluttered open. What? I can feel it, through the bond. You're spiraling. I'm not. You are. His grip on her tightened slightly. And you need to stop. We made our choice. You didn't force us. Didn't I? No. She wanted to believe him, but the guilt sat heavy in her chest right alongside the bonds. They reached the outpost just as full dark settled over the forest. It was less of an outpost and more of a ruin. The stone walls were crumbling, the roof half collapsed, and the door hung crooked on rusted hinges. But it was shelter, and right now that was all that mattered. Kale went in first, checking for threats. He emerged a moment later. Clear, barely, but clear. Brig carried Rhea inside and set her down against the least damaged wall. The interior was a single room, maybe 20 feet across, with a fireplace that looked like it might collapse if anyone breathed on it too hard. Soren was already gathering wood from the surrounding forest. Kale knelt beside the fireplace, examining it. Think it'll hold? Brig asked. Guess we'll find out. 20 minutes later, they had a fire going. It was small, barely enough to push back the cold, but it was something. The warmth felt like a miracle against Rhea's skin. Soren produced a rabbit from somewhere. Rhea hadn't even seen him hunt, and began preparing it with quick, efficient movements. The smell of cooking meat made her stomach clench with hunger. When did you last eat? Kael asked her. Rhea had to think about it. 4 days, maybe 5. That explains a lot. When the rabbit was ready, Soren divided it into 4 portions. Rhea's was the largest, though she noticed all 3 men eating less than they should. I can share, she said. Eat, Brig said. You need it more than we do. She ate. The meat was tough and gamey, but it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. She forced herself to go slow, to let her shrunken stomach adjust, but it took everything she had not to devour it in seconds. As they ate, an uneasy silence settled over the group. The fire crackled. Outside, the forest was alive with sounds, rustling, distant howls, the occasional snap of a branch. Finally, Kael spoke. We need to talk about what happens next. Next is we survive, Brig said. And then what? We can't run forever. Darius won't stop. He'll send every hunter he has. He'll burn the entire forest if he has to. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we need a plan beyond keep moving. Soren was leaning against the wall, his eyes half closed. The bond, he said quietly. That's the key. What about it? Rhea asked. What you did today, pulling power from all of us at once. That's not normal. That shouldn't be possible. But it is. Which means you're not normal either. Soren's eyes opened, focusing on her. The question is why? Rhea shook her head. I don't know. I'm nobody. Just a runt who got lucky. Luck doesn't create bonds, Kael said. Especially not bonds like this. There has to be a reason. Then what is it? None of them had an answer. They sat in silence for a long moment, the firelight casting shifting shadows on the crumbling walls. My grandmother used to tell stories, Brig said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. About the old bloodlines, the ones from before the citadels, before the packs consolidated. She said there were wolves who could bond with multiple mates, who could share power across a network. Legends, Kael said. Maybe. Or maybe not. Brig looked at Rhea. She called them conduits, said they were rare, dangerous, that the first kings hunted them down because they threatened the hierarchy. You think I'm one of these conduits? I think it's possible. Soren leaned forward. If that's true, if you can really bond with multiple wolves and share power between them, then you're not just a threat to Darius. You're a threat to every alpha in the frontier. Great, Rhea muttered. Just what I needed. It also means you're valuable, Kael said. Extremely valuable. If you can do what Brig's grandmother described, you could create an army. A real one. Not bound by pack law or territory, but by choice. I can barely control the 3 bonds I have. How am I supposed to create an army? You learn. Learn how? There's no one left to teach me. You said they were all hunted down. Then you figure it out yourself. Rhea laughed bitterly. You make it sound so easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's possible. And right now, possible is all we've got. The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks. Rhea stared into the flames, her mind racing. An army. The idea was insane. She could barely keep herself alive, let alone bond with dozens of wolves. But the alternative was running until Darius caught them. And he would catch them. Eventually. How long do I have? She asked quietly. Soren understood immediately. Before your body gives out? Hard to say. Days. Maybe a week if you're careful. And if I keep using the power like I did today? Hours. Perfect. So I have a week to figure out how to control something that shouldn't exist or I die. Essentially, Rhea closed her eyes. The bonds pulsed in her chest, steady and insistent. She could feel Kael's determination, Brig's quiet strength, Soren's cold calculation. They believed she could do this, or at least they were willing to pretend they did. She opened her eyes. Okay, then teach me. Kael raised an eyebrow. Teach you what? Everything. How to fight, how to hide, how to survive out here. If I'm going to last more than a week, I need to be more than just a vessel for borrowed power. Brig and Soren exchanged a look. It's going to hurt, Brig warned. Everything hurts already. This will be worse. I don't care. Kael studied her for a long moment, then nodded. We start at dawn. They slept in shifts. Brig took first watch, then Soren, then Kael. Rhea tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't shut off. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the courtyard, felt the bond breaking, heard the crowd's laughter. She wondered if it would ever stop haunting her. When dawn finally came, pale and gray through the broken roof, Kael shook her awake. Up, he said. Time to work. Her body protested every movement, but she forced herself to stand. Outside, the forest was shrouded in mist, the trees like ghosts in the half-light. Kael led her to a small clearing near the outpost. Brig and Soren followed, watching. First lesson, Kael said. You need to learn how to hide your scent. Right now, every wolf within 5 miles can smell you. That makes you easy to track. How do I hide it? Control, focus. You have to pull your scent inward, make yourself invisible to other wolves. He demonstrated, and Rhea watched as his scent, sharp and metallic, seemed to fade, becoming almost undetectable. She tried. Closed her eyes, focused on pulling everything inward. Nothing happened. Try harder, Kael said. She tried again, still nothing. You're thinking too much. It's instinct, not thought. Feel it, don't force it. Easy for him to say. She spent the next hour trying and failing. Frustration built in her chest, hot and tight. The bonds pulsed, feeding her emotions back to the 3 men, which only made it worse. Finally, just when she was about to give up, something shifted. She felt her scent pull inward, condensing, hiding. There, Kael said. Hold it. She held it for maybe 10 seconds before it slipped away. But it was a start. Again, Kael said. They worked until midday. By the time they stopped, Rhea could hold her scent hidden for almost a minute at a time. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Next lesson, Brig said, stepping forward. Hand-to-hand combat. Rhea's stomach sank. You're going to hit me. I'm going to teach you how to not get hit. There's a difference. There wasn't. For the next 2 hours, Brig put her through a brutal crash course in close-quarters fighting. He showed her how to use her smaller size to her advantage, how to target weak points, how to turn an opponent's strength against them. And yes, he hit her. A lot. By the time they finished, Rhea was covered in bruises and barely standing. But she'd managed to land a hit on him. Just one, a lucky strike to the ribs. and the look of surprise on his face made every bruise worth it. "Not bad," he admitted grudgingly. "I hate you," Rhea gasped. "You'll thank me later." Soren's lesson was different. He didn't hit her or make her practice techniques. Instead, he sat her down and taught her about the forest. "The wild lands will kill you faster than any wolf if you don't respect them," he said. "You need to know what's safe to eat, what's poisonous, where to find water, how to read tracks." He showed her plants she'd never seen before, explained which berries would sustain her and which would stop her heart. He taught her how to tell the difference between wolf tracks and bear tracks, how to spot a rogue's den, how to move quietly through undergrowth. It was overwhelming, but Rhea absorbed every word. This was survival. This was staying alive. By the time they returned to the outpost, the sun was setting and Rhea could barely move. Every muscle screamed, her head pounded. The bonds pulsed with shared exhaustion, but she'd made it through the day. "Tomorrow we do it again," Kael said, "and the day after that, until you can do all of it without thinking." Rhea just nodded. She didn't have the energy for words. That night, as she lay by the fire, the bonds humming quietly in her chest, she realized something. She was changing. Not just physically, though that was happening too. Her body was adapting, growing stronger, faster. The power she'd pulled from the three men was still there, buried deep, waiting to be used again. But more than that, she was starting to believe. Not that she'd survive. She still wasn't sure about that, but that maybe, just maybe, she could become something more than the runt who'd been thrown away. The days blurred together, training, eating, sleeping, repeat. Kael pushed her relentlessly, drilling scent control and tracking until she could hide herself from even Soren's sharp senses. Brig's combat lessons left her bruised and bleeding, but she got better, faster, more efficient. Soren taught her the language of the forest, how to read danger in the tilt of a bird's head or the sudden silence of insects. And through it all, the bonds grew stronger. She could feel them constantly now, a background hum that never quite went away. Kael's restlessness, Brig's steady presence, Soren's quiet watchfulness. Sometimes she caught flashes of their thoughts. Nothing clear, just emotions and impressions. It was invasive and intimate and terrifying all at once. On the 5th day, Soren disappeared. He left at dawn without a word, and when he hadn't returned by midday, Rhea started to worry. "He does this," Kael said, noticing her concern. "Goes off alone. He'll be back." What if Darius found him? He didn't. We'd feel it through the bond. Rhea wasn't convinced, but there was nothing she could do except wait. Soren returned at dusk, and he wasn't alone. A woman followed him into the clearing, old, bent with age, her hair white and wild. She wore layers of mismatched furs and carried a walking stick that looked older than the forest itself. "Who the hell is that?" Brig demanded. "Her name is Mira," Soren said. "She's a healer, and she knows about conduits." The old woman's eyes fixed on Rhea, sharp and knowing despite her age. "So you're the one causing all the trouble?" Rhea bristled. "I didn't ask for any of this. Never do, child. Never do." Mira shuffled closer, peering at Rhea like she was examining a particularly interesting insect. "Let me see." "See what?" "The bonds, girl. Let me see them." Before Rhea could ask how, Mira's hand shot out and pressed against her chest. Heat flared, sudden and intense, and Rhea gasped as the bonds lit up like fire. Mira's eyes widened. "3 already, and you're still standing. Remarkable." She pulled her hand back and the heat faded. Rhea was left shaking, her heart hammering. "What are you?" Kael asked the old woman. "Someone who remembers things better forgotten." Mira looked at each of them in turn. "You're bound to a conduit, a real one. I haven't seen one in 60 years, thought they were all gone." "Can you help her?" Soren asked. "Help her what? Survive? Control it? Those are very different things." "Both," Rhea said. "I need both." Mira cackled. "Ambitious, I like that." She settled onto a rock, her old bones creaking. The conduit bloodline was hunted to extinction for a reason. They were too powerful, too unpredictable. One conduit could bond with dozens of wolves, create armies that answered to no king. Brig mentioned that, Rhea said. "Did he mention the cost?" Mira's eyes glittered. "Every bond drains you. Your life force, your essence, whatever you want to call it, The more bonds you create, the faster you burn out. Most conduits didn't live past 30. Ria's stomach dropped. 30? If they were lucky. Some lasted less than a year after manifesting. Kale stepped forward. There has to be a way to control it, to make it sustainable. There is, Mira said, but it requires discipline, training, and most importantly, balance. You can't just pull power from your bonds. You have to give back. How? Ria asked. Through the connection. Right now, you're a drain on these three. You pull their strength to survive, but if you learn to push power back, to create a cycle instead of a one-way flow, you can sustain the bonds indefinitely. Can you teach me? Mira was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. Finally, she sighed. I can try. But I'm old, girl. I don't have much time left. If you're going to learn, you need to learn fast. How fast? Days. Maybe a week. The same timeline Soren had given her. Then we start now, Ria said. Mira smiled, showing teeth that were surprisingly sharp. Good. Let's see if you're worth the trouble. The training that followed made everything before seem easy. Mira didn't coddle her. She pushed Ria to her absolute limits, forcing her to hold connections with all three men simultaneously while performing complex mental exercises. It was like juggling knives while running uphill. Ria failed, repeatedly. Each failure sent backlash through the bonds, making all four of them gasp with pain. Kyle got nosebleeds. Briggs' hands shook. Soren's vision blurred, but Ria kept trying. On the third day, something clicked. She was sitting in the center of the clearing, eyes closed, holding the three bonds open. Mira was talking, her voice a constant drone of instructions, but Ria had stopped listening. Instead, she focused on the connections themselves. They weren't just threads, they were living things, pulsing with shared life. And if she concentrated, she could feel where they connected to each man. Not in their chests like hers, but deeper. In that place where instinct lived, where the wolf and the human were one. She reached out through the bond to Kyle and pushed. Just a little. Just a trickle of energy, barely more than a breath. Kale gasped. What did you just... Again, Mira commanded. Ria pushed again, this time to Brig. The big man's eyes widened, and for a moment she felt his exhaustion ease, replaced by a surge of vitality. Yes, Mira hissed. Now the third. She pushed to Soren, and the cycle completed. Energy flowed from her to them and back again, a closed loop that sustained itself. For the first time since the bonds had formed, Ria didn't feel like she was drowning. Hold it, Mira said. As long as you can. Ria held it for 5 minutes before the strain became too much, and the cycle collapsed. But it was enough. You did it, Kyle said, and there was something like awe in his voice. Mira nodded approvingly. Not bad, child. Not bad at all. Practice that until it's second nature. Once you can maintain the cycle without thinking, you'll be ready for more bonds. More? Ria asked weakly. Did you think 3 was the limit? Mira cackled. You're a conduit, girl. You could bond with 100 wolves if your body could handle it. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Over the next 2 days, Ria practiced the energy cycle until she could maintain it in her sleep. And Mira taught her other things too. How to sense potential bonds before they formed, how to sever connections cleanly if necessary, how to use the network to communicate across distances. It was overwhelming, but Ria absorbed it all with desperate intensity. On the 7th day, Mira announced she was leaving. You've learned what I can teach in the time we have, she said. The rest you'll have to figure out yourself. Wait, Ria said. There's so much I still don't know. There always will be. That's the nature of power like yours. It grows with you, changes with you. No one can predict where it will lead. Then what am I supposed to do? Mira looked at her with something that might have been pity. Survive, child, and when the time comes, make them pay for what they did to you. She left before Ria could ask what she meant. That night, as they sat around the fire, Kale broke the silence. Darius will have trackers in the forest by now, dozens of them. We can't stay here much longer. Where do we go? Brig asked. There's an old settlement, Soren said slowly, on the eastern edge of the wildlands. It's where rogues and exiles gather. No king's law reaches there. Why haven't we gone there already? Ria asked. Because it's dangerous. The wolves there don't answer to anyone. They'd as soon kill us as look at us. But you're a conduit. If you can prove your worth, they might listen, might even join you. Rhea thought about it. An entire settlement of outcasts, just like her, wolves who'd been thrown away, rejected, left to die. If she could bond with even a fraction of them. How do I prove my worth? She asked. Soren's expression was grim. By surviving their trials, and trust me, they're not gentle. Kale looked at Rhea. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. But Rhea shook her head. She'd spent 7 days training, learning, growing stronger. And she'd realized something. Running wasn't enough anymore. She didn't just want to survive, she wanted to fight back. We go to the settlement, she said, and I'll pass whatever trials they throw at me. Brig grinned. Now you're talking. They left at dawn, moving fast through the forest. Rhea's training showed in every step. She moved quietly now, her scent hidden, her senses attuned to the world around her. The bonds pulsed steadily in her chest, the energy cycle flowing between all 4 of them. She felt strong, ready. The settlement appeared through the trees just after midday, a ramshackle collection of buildings built into the hollows of ancient trees, connected by rope bridges and hidden pathways. And standing at the entrance, waiting for them, was a massive wolf with scars crisscrossing his gray fur. He shifted as they approached, revealing a man who looked like he'd been carved from stone and violence. I'm Rask, he said, and you're either very brave or very stupid to come here. Rhea stepped forward, meeting his eyes. I'm Rhea Varen, and I'm here to offer you a choice. Rask's laugh was like gravel grinding together. A choice? What kind of choice? Join me. Bond with me. And together we'll burn down every king who ever threw us away. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Rask smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing Rhea had ever seen. Prove you're worth bonding with, he said. Survive the gauntlet, then we'll talk. The gauntlet wasn't a place. It was a trial by fire, and Rhea could smell the violence before she even saw it. Rask led them deeper into the settlement, past hollowed trees filled with watching eyes and rope bridges that swayed dangerously with every step. The wolves here were different from Citadel wolves, scarred, lean, with the kind of hunger that came from surviving where survival wasn't guaranteed. They looked at Rhea like she was prey. The rules are simple, Rask said, stopping in a clearing ringed by makeshift stands carved into the tree trunks. Dozens of wolves had already gathered, perched above like vultures waiting for something to die. You fight 3 challengers. You don't have to win. You just have to survive. And if I do, then we'll consider your offer. Brig stepped forward, his voice a low growl. She's barely recovered. This isn't fair. Rask's smile was all teeth. Life isn't fair. She should know that better than anyone. Rhea put a hand on Brig's arm. I can do this. You don't have to prove anything to these. Yes, I do. She met his eyes. If I want them to follow me, I need to show them I'm worth following. Kael moved beside her, his voice quiet. Use the bonds if you need to. Don't die trying to be a hero. I'll try not to. Soren said nothing, but she felt his concern through the bond, sharp and tight. Rask gestured to the center of the clearing. Step forward, conduit. Let's see what you're made of. Rhea walked into the circle. The ground was packed dirt, stained dark with old blood. Above, the crowd had grown. She counted at least 50 wolves now, maybe more, all of them watching, waiting. A door carved into one of the massive trees swung open. The first challenger stepped out. He was huge, not as big as Brig, but close. Muscles layered on muscles, covered in scars that told stories of dozens of fights. He didn't shift, didn't need to. The message was clear. He was going to beat her with his bare hands. Name's Tor, he said, cracking his knuckles. Nothing personal, Runt, just business. Rhea didn't bother responding. She fell into the stance Brig had drilled into her over the past week. Weight balanced, hands up, eyes tracking every micro movement. Tor charged. He was fast for his size, closing the distance in 3 strides. His fist came at her head like a hammer. Rhea ducked, feeling the air displacement as his knuckles passed inches from her skull. She drove her elbow into his ribs, putting her whole body behind it. Tor grunted but didn't slow. He grabbed for her, his hands like vices. She slipped sideways, using his momentum against him the way Brig had taught her. Her foot hooked behind his ankle and she shoved. Tor stumbled but didn't fall. He spun, faster than something that big should move, and his backhand caught her across the face. Rhea's world exploded into stars. She hit the ground hard, tasting blood, her vision swimming. The crowd roared. Through the bond, she felt Kale's surge of alarm, Brig's barely contained rage, Soren's cold calculation telling her to get up, move, don't stop moving. Tor was coming at her again. Rhea rolled, barely avoiding his boot as it slammed into the dirt where her head had been. She scrambled to her feet, spitting blood. Not bad, Tor said, but not good enough. He came at her again, relentless. Rhea gave ground, blocking what she could, dodging what she couldn't. Every hit that landed felt like getting struck by a boulder. Her ribs screamed, her arms went numb, but she didn't go down. She waited, watched, looking for the opening Brig had sworn would come. There. Tor overextended on a right hook, his weight too far forward. Rhea stepped inside his guard and drove her knee into his groin with everything she had left. Tor's eyes bulged. He dropped like a stone. The crowd went wild, half cheering, half jeering. Rhea stood over him, gasping, every part of her body screaming. "First trial complete," Rask called out. "Round 2. "What?" Rhea wheezed. "I need no rest. That's not how this works." The second door opened. This time, 2 wolves padded out. Not humans, full wolf form, sleek, scarred, with eyes that gleamed with intelligence and malice. They circled her, perfectly coordinated. Rhea's heart hammered. She couldn't fight 2 wolves at once, not in her current state. She could barely stand. The bonds pulsed in her chest, offering power. All she had to do was pull. But if she pulled, she'd burn out. Mira's warning echoed in her mind. And if she burned out here, she was dead. The wolves attacked simultaneously. Rhea threw herself sideways, feeling teeth snap closed where her leg had been a moment before. She rolled to her feet and immediately had to dodge again as the second wolf came at her throat. She couldn't win this with strength or speed. She needed something else. The bonds weren't just for pulling power. Mira had taught her that. They were connections. Links between minds. What if... Rhea didn't let herself finish the thought. She just acted. She opened herself to the bonds completely, not pulling power, but reaching out through the connections, feeling for something beyond Kale, Brig, and Soren. And she found it. The 2 wolves attacking her weren't bonded to anyone. They were rogues, outcasts, alone. But that loneliness was a wound, raw and bleeding, and Rhea could feel it like it was her own. She pushed against it, not with force, with understanding. One of the wolves hesitated, its head tilting, confused. Rhea pushed harder, letting her own pain flow through the nascent connection. The rejection, the abandonment, the desperate struggle to survive. The wolf whimpered. The second wolf attacked while its partner was distracted, going for Rhea's throat. She couldn't dodge in time, but the first wolf could. It slammed into its companion mid-leap, and the 2 went down in a snarling tangle of fur and teeth. The crowd fell silent. Rhea stood there, breathing hard, blood dripping from a dozen cuts, and stared at the wolves. The first one had stopped fighting. It was looking at her now, something new in its eyes. Recognition. "What did you do?" Rask's voice cut through the silence. Rhea turned to face him. "What I was born to do." She reached out through the fragile connection she'd just formed and pulled, not power, but intent. The wolf padded toward her, ignoring the snarls of its companion, and sat at her feet. "I bonded with it," Rhea said, without asking, without forcing, because it wanted to. The settlement erupted. Wolves shifted, voices raised, some in anger, some in awe. Rask's expression was unreadable as he descended from his perch. "That's not possible," he said, "but bonds don't form that fast." They do if both sides are willing." Rhea met his eyes, refusing to back down despite her exhaustion. "Your people are lonely, abandoned, just like me, and I can give them something the kings never could, choice." Rask studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at the wolf sitting beside her. "Is this true? You chose her?" The wolf's response was to press closer to Rhea's leg. Rask's jaw tightened. "One more trial. If you survive it, You'll have earned your chance. Well, what's the third trial? He smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Me. The crowd went absolutely feral with excitement. Wolves howled, stomped, the noise deafening. Apparently this didn't happen often. Kael's voice cut through the bond. Rhea, don't. You can't fight him. I know what he is. She could feel it just by looking at him. Rask wasn't just strong. He was old, experienced, and he'd survived things that would have killed normal wolves a dozen times over. But she didn't have a choice. I'm ready, she said. Rask shifted. His wolf form was massive, gray and scarred, with eyes that burned like embers. He was easily twice the size of a normal wolf, his muscles rippling under his pelt as he stalked toward her. Rhea didn't shift. She couldn't. Her wolf form was small, weak, the very reason she'd been called a runt her entire life. In human form, at least she could think, strategize. Rask circled her, taking his time, savoring it. Then he attacked. He moved like lightning. Rhea barely got her arms up before his jaws closed around her forearm. The pain was instant and overwhelming. She felt bones crack. She screamed. Through the bond, she felt Brig try to charge forward, felt Kyle hold him back, felt Soren's cold voice cutting through the panic. She needs to do this alone. Rask shook her like a rag doll, then released. Rhea flew backward, slamming into the dirt. Her arm was useless, hanging at a wrong angle, blood pouring from the puncture wounds. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. Rask patted closer, and she could swear he was smiling. This was it. She was going to die here, in this forgotten settlement, for wolves who didn't even know her name. The 4 bonds in her chest pulsed. Kael, Brig, Soren, and the new one, fragile and uncertain. And suddenly Rhea understood. She'd been thinking about this all wrong. The bonds weren't just connections. They were a network. And networks didn't just transfer power. They amplified it. She reached out to all 4 bonds at once and pulled. But this time, she didn't just pull power. She pulled everything. Memories, skills, instincts. The collective knowledge of 3 trained warriors and 1 rogue survivor. The bonds blazed. Kael's speed flooded her muscles. Brig's strength reinforced her bones. Soren's precision sharpened her senses. And the rogue wolf's pure, desperate will to survive locked into place like armor around her heart. Rhea's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. She stood, her broken arm already healing, the bones grinding back into place with a sickening crunch. The pain was there, but distant, manageable. Rask's ears flattened. He'd seen a lot in his life, but he'd never seen this. Rhea moved. She was on him before he could react. Her fist, reinforced with borrowed strength, slamming into his jaw hard enough to snap his head sideways. He snarled and tried to bite, but she was already gone, moving with Kael's speed, circling to his blind spot. She struck again and again, each hit precise, calculated, aimed at pressure points Soren's instincts highlighted like targets. Rask tried to shift back to human form, but Rhea didn't give him the chance. She locked her arm around his throat from behind, using Brig's grappling techniques, and squeezed. Yield, she hissed. Rask thrashed, his claws tearing at her arms, but she held on. Blood ran down her skin, hot and slick, but the healing kept pace with the damage. Yield, she said again. For a moment she thought he'd rather die. Then, slowly, deliberately, he tapped his paw against the ground 3 times. The crowd went silent. Rhea released him and stepped back, the power draining out of her all at once. She swayed, nearly fell, but forced herself to stay upright. Rask shifted back to human form, rubbing his throat. Blood trickled from his mouth. He stared at her with something between fury and respect. You're insane, he said. Probably. You almost killed me. You were trying to kill me first. He laughed. It was a rough, painful sound, but genuine. Fair enough. He raised his voice so the entire settlement could hear. She's earned it. Anyone who wants to bond with the conduit, step forward. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one wolf shifted and walked into the circle, an older female with gray streaking her muzzle. I'm Lysa, she said. I'll bond with you. Another wolf joined her, then another. Within minutes, 15 wolves stood in the clearing, all looking at Rhea with varying degrees of hope and desperation. Are you sure? She asked them. Once we bond, there's no going back. Darius will hunt all of us. He hunts us already, Lysa said. At least with you, we can hunt him back. Rhea looked at Kyle, Brig, and Soren. They nodded. She turned back to the waiting wolves and opened herself to the bonds. The connections formed one by one, each different, each unique. Some were strong and immediate, others tentative, uncertain, but they all held. By the time the last bond snapped into place, Rhea had 19 wolves connected to her through the network, their strength and skills and memories flowing through the connections like water through a web. It should have killed her. Mira had said most conduits couldn't handle more than a dozen bonds, but Rhea had figured out the secret, the energy cycle. Instead of draining her bonded wolves, she pushed power back to them, creating a closed loop that sustained itself. The more bonds she added, the stronger the cycle became. She was no longer a runt surviving on borrowed strength. She was something new, something the frontier had never seen before. A collective. Rask approached her, his expression serious. "You've got your army. What now?" Rhea was about to answer when she felt it, a spike of alarm through the bonds, not from any of the newly bonded wolves, from Soren. She turned just as he burst into the clearing, his face pale. "They're here," he said. "Darius sent his entire force, at least 200 soldiers. They're surrounding the settlement right now." The crowd erupted into chaos. Wolves shifted, shouted, some bolting for the trees immediately. "How long do we have?" Rask demanded. "Minutes. Maybe less." Rhea's mind raced. 200 trained soldiers against 19 newly bonded wolves in a settlement of rogues who'd never fought as a unit. The math was brutal. They couldn't win a straight fight, but they didn't need to win. They just needed to survive long enough to escape. "Listen to me," Rhea said, projecting her voice across the clearing. The authority in it surprised even her. "We split into 3 groups. Rask, take the western route with anyone who can't fight. Get them out. Kyle, you take the eastern path. Draw some of the soldiers away." "What about you?" Kyle asked. "I'm going north, right through the center of their formation. That's suicide. That's the point. I'm what they want. If I make myself a target, they'll focus on me and leave the others alone." Brig grabbed her arm. "You can't face 200 soldiers alone." "I won't be alone." Rhea looked at the 19 bonded wolves around her. "I'll have them, and through the network I'll have all of you. It's not enough. It has to be." Before anyone could argue further, horns blared from the forest. The king's forces were moving in. "Go," Rhea commanded. "Now." The settlement exploded into motion. Wolves scattered in every direction, some shifting, some staying human, all moving with desperate speed. Rask grabbed Rhea's shoulder before he left. "If you survive this, you'll have proven you're more than just talk. But if you die, I'm coming back to your corpse and telling you I told you so. I'll try to avoid that." He grinned and vanished into the trees, with 30 rogues trailing behind him. Kyle, Brig, and Soren moved to leave with their assigned groups, but Rhea stopped them through the bond. "Stay close," she said silently, the words traveling through the network. "I'm going to need you." She felt their acknowledgement, then they were gone, melting into the forest. Rhea stood alone in the clearing with her 19 bonded wolves. Some were shifted, some were human, all of them were terrified. She didn't blame them. "We're not fighting to win," she told them. "We're fighting to buy time. Hit fast, hit hard, and don't stop moving. Trust the network, trust each other, and trust me." Through the bonds, she felt their fear transform into something harder, determination. The first soldiers crashed through the tree line. Rhea smiled, and then she unleashed hell. The network lit up like a sun. Power flowed between all 19 bonds simultaneously, creating a feedback loop of amplified strength. Rhea could feel every wolf's position, every heartbeat, every thought. They moved as one. The bonded wolves hit the soldiers like a tidal wave. They didn't fight fair, they didn't fight clean, they fought to survive. Rhea was at the center of it all, directing the chaos through the bonds, showing targets, coordinating strikes, pulling wolves back before they got overwhelmed. She'd never felt anything like it. It was intoxicating and terrifying, and she could feel herself burning through energy at an unsustainable rate. But she held on. A soldier came at her with a sword. She dodged, grabbed his wrist, and broke it with a twist that Brig's muscle memory supplied. Another came from behind. She felt him through the network before he arrived and kicked backward without looking, catching him in the chest. Around her, the bonded wolves fought with a coordination that shouldn't have been possible. They covered each other's weaknesses, shared strength when one faltered, operated like a single organism with 20 bodies. The soldiers hesitated. This wasn't what they'd expected, but there were too many of them. For every soldier that fell, 2 more took his place. The bonded wolves were getting tired, taking wounds that the healing couldn't keep up with. Rhea felt one bond wink out as a wolf went down, then another. 17 left. Fall back, she commanded through the network. North, through the trees. They retreated in a controlled chaos, fighting every step of the way. Rhea stayed at the rear, covering them, taking hits meant for others. An arrow punched through her shoulder. She snapped the shaft off and kept moving. A blade opened a gash across her ribs. She ignored it. They broke through into deeper forest, and for a moment Rhea thought they might actually make it. Then the soldiers in front of them stepped aside, and she saw what they'd been hiding. Darius himself stood blocking the path, flanked by 50 of his personal guard. And chained beside him, beaten and bloody, were Kyle, Brig, and Soren. Rhea's world stopped. "Hello, Rhea," Darius said, his voice cold and smooth. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Through the bonds, she felt her 3 generals' pain, their fury at being captured, their desperation for her to run. But she couldn't run. Not from this. "Let them go," she said. "No, I don't think I will. You see, I've learned something interesting about your little talent. The bonds work both ways, don't they? If I kill them, you feel it. And if I kill you..." He drew a silver knife and pressed it against Kyle's throat. "They die with you." Rhea's bonded wolves growled, ready to attack, but she held them back through the network. They couldn't win this fight. Not against this many. Not with the generals captured. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simple. Surrender. Come back to the Citadel, give up this rebellion, and maybe I'll let them live." "You're lying." "Probably, but it's the only chance they have." Through the bonds, Kyle spoke to her silently. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare surrender for us." But what choice did she have? She looked at the 19 wolves around her. 17 now, she corrected, feeling the absence of the fallen. They were looking to her for orders, trusting her to save them. She looked at Darius, at the soldiers surrounding them, at the impossible odds. And then she looked at Kyle, Brig, and Soren. Her first bonds. The ones who'd saved her when they had every reason to let her die. She made her decision. "Okay," she said to Darius. "I surrender, but you let all of them go. The wolves, the generals, everyone." "Rhea, no!" Brig started. "Shut up," she said gently. Then to Darius, "Do we have a deal?" Darius smiled. "We do." He gestured and soldiers moved forward with silver chains. Rhea let them bind her wrists, let them pull her forward. As she passed her bonded wolves, she spoke to them through the network one last time. "When I give the signal, run. Don't look back. Don't try to save me. Just run and find Rask. He'll protect you." She felt their protests, but she shut them down with pure command. The soldiers dragged her in front of Darius. He looked down at her, triumph written across his face. "Foolish girl," he said. "Did you really think you could challenge me?" "No," Rhea said. "I thought I could distract you." His expression shifted to confusion. "What?" Rhea opened all the bonds at once and pulled. Not power, not strength, pain. Every wound she'd taken, every ache, every burning nerve, she pushed it all out through the network, flooding every bond with pure, overwhelming agony. The bonded wolves screamed. The 3 generals gasped. Even Darius stumbled, confused by the psychic backlash bleeding through the air. And in that moment of chaos, Rhea did something she'd never tried before. She created a bond with every soldier standing within 30 feet. Not consensual bonds, not gentle ones. She forced the connections open like ripping doors off their hinges, linked every mind within range into the network, and then detonated the entire thing from the inside. The psychic explosion knocked everyone to the ground. Rhea felt the bonds shred, felt her mind fragmenting under the backlash, felt herself dying, but she'd bought them time. "Run!" she screamed out loud, her voice breaking. The bonded wolves ran. The generals, their chains broken in the chaos, ran. Even some of Darius's soldiers ran. too overwhelmed by what they'd just experienced to do anything else. Darius grabbed Rhea by the throat, lifting her off the ground. His face was twisted with rage. "What did you do?" he snarled. Rhea smiled through the blood filling her mouth. "I won." Then everything went black. She woke to silver chains around her wrists, silver bars in front of her face, silver threading through the stone walls like veins of poison. Rhea's entire body screamed. The psychic explosion had torn through her like wildfire, leaving her mind fractured and raw. She could feel the bonds, fewer now, some severed completely in the blast, but they pulsed weak and distant, like dying embers. How many had she lost? She couldn't tell. Counting hurt too much. She was back in the Citadel, in a cell even worse than before. This one was built specifically to hold wolves like her, every surface laced with silver, the air heavy with wolfsbane that made her throat burn with every breath. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Darius appeared, immaculate as always, despite the chaos she'd caused. He studied her through the bars with cold satisfaction. "You're awake." "Good. I was worried you'd die before I could make an example of you." Rhea didn't respond. Speaking felt like swallowing glass. "Your little stunt killed 12 of my soldiers," he continued. "Drove 6 more completely mad. They're in the cells below, screaming about voices in their heads that won't stop." He smiled. "I have you to thank for showing me just how dangerous you really are." "Where are they?" Her voice came out as a rasp. "The generals, the others. Your bonded wolves scattered." "Most are probably dead by now. The hunters have been very thorough." He paused. "As for my former generals, they're in cells just like this one, waiting for their executions at dawn." Rhea's chest constricted. Through the bonds, she could feel them. Kael's barely controlled rage, Briggs' grinding despair, Soren's cold calculation still searching for a way out. They were alive. Hurt, but alive. "You're going to execute all of us?" "Publicly, in the same courtyard where I rejected you." Darius leaned closer to the bars. "The entire Citadel will watch. They'll see what happens to those who defy their king, and when you're dead, this foolish rebellion dies with you." "You're afraid of me," he laughed. "Afraid? Of a dying runt in silver chains?" "You should be." Rhea forced herself to sit up, ignoring the way the silver burned against her skin. "Because even in here, even broken, I'm still connected to them. And you can't kill what you can't contain." "We'll see about that." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, I almost forgot. I'm sending word to every citadel, every territory. They'll know what you are, what you can do, and they'll hunt every conduit bloodline into extinction. Your kind will be wiped from existence. Consider it your legacy." The door slammed shut, leaving Rhea alone in the silver-poisoned dark. She sat there for a long time, feeling the bonds pulse weakly in her chest. Some were so faint she could barely detect them. Others had gone completely silent. But they were still there, still alive. And as long as they were alive, she had a chance. Rhea closed her eyes and reached out through the network, carefully this time, not pulling power, but sending out the barest thread of consciousness. The response was immediate. Kael's presence flooded through, sharp with relief. "You're awake, thank the—" "How bad?" she asked through the bond. "Bad. They've got us in separate cells, all silver. Briggs in the worst shape. They beat him pretty thoroughly after we were captured." "Can you shift?" "No, the silver and wolfsbane make it impossible. We're stuck human." Rhea felt for Soren next. His response was more controlled, clinical. "They're planning to execute us in 13 hours. Dawn, they've already built the platform." "Can you get out?" "Not from inside. The cells are too secure. They learned from last time." Briggs' voice was rough when he spoke. "Don't even think about trying to save us? Whatever you're planning, don't. Just get yourself out and run." "I'm not leaving you." "Rhea, I said I'm not leaving you." She pushed the words through with absolute conviction. "We got into this together. We're getting out together." "There's no way out," Kael said quietly. "Even if you could break free, you'd never make it past the guards. And the execution is public. They'll have hundreds of soldiers in the courtyard." "Good. Then I won't have to go looking for them." Through the bonds, she felt their confusion mixed with alarm. "What are you planning?" Soren asked. "Something stupid. Something that'll either save us all or kill us all." Rhea took a breath, testing the bonds one by one. 17 were still functioning. 17 wolves scattered across the wildlands, most injured, all terrified. But I need you to trust me. We trust you, Briggs said immediately. Then be ready. When the time comes, I'm going to need everything you've got. She withdrew from the bond before they could ask more questions. She needed to save her strength, because what she was about to try had never been done before. Mira hadn't taught her this. She'd barely hinted it was possible. But Rhea had felt it during the explosion, the moment when she'd forced bonds with dozens of soldiers simultaneously. It had nearly killed her, yes, but it had also shown her something. The bonds weren't just connections between individuals, they were doorways. And if she could force them open, she could reach anyone, everyone. The Citadel held thousands of wolves. Most were loyal to Darius, conditioned from birth to obey the Alpha's will. But beneath that loyalty was something else. Fear, resentment, anger at a system that treated them as disposable. She'd seen it in the lower ranks, heard it in whispered conversations, felt it in the way soldiers flinched when Darius walked past. The Citadel was a powder keg. It just needed a spark. Rhea started small. She couldn't force bonds from inside the silver cell. The poison blocked her abilities too effectively. But she could prepare. She spent the next hours meditating, pulling energy through the existing bonds in tiny amounts, cycling it back out, building the pattern stronger. The 17 bonded wolves felt her working and began feeding her strength without being asked. Somewhere in the wildlands, her network was rebuilding itself. Footsteps approached. Multiple guards this time. The cell door opened. 6 soldiers entered, all heavily armed, silver weapons ready. "On your feet," one commanded. "The king wants you moved to the courtyard early. Make sure the platform's properly tested." They hauled her up roughly, keeping their distance like she might explode again. The silver chains cut into her wrists, but she didn't resist. Let them think she was broken. They dragged her through corridors she remembered from her escape, past the servant quarters, through the main halls where wolves stopped to stare, some with hatred, some with fear, a few with something that looked almost like hope. The courtyard was exactly as she remembered. Black stone, high walls, the platform where Darius had rejected her now rebuilt and expanded. 3 stakes had been added, one for her, one for each general. Dawn was maybe 2 hours away. The sky was still dark, but torches had been lit around the perimeter, casting everything in harsh orange light. The guards chained her to the center stake. The silver burned through her clothes, searing her skin. She gritted her teeth and didn't scream. "Comfortable?" one guard sneered. Rhea didn't answer. They left her there, posting sentries at every exit. Alone on the platform, she tested the chains. Solid, unbreakable. She wasn't getting free through physical strength. Good thing that wasn't the plan. An hour passed. Wolves began filing into the courtyard, hundreds of them, just like Kael had predicted. Soldiers, servants, craftsmen. The entire Citadel population forced to witness what happened to traitors. Rhea watched them gather, studying faces, reading body language. She was looking for something specific. There, a young soldier near the back. Barely more than a boy, his hands shaking as he gripped his spear. She could see it in his stance. He didn't want to be here. And there, a female servant with scars on her arms and hatred in her eyes. Not hatred for Rhea, for something else. And there, and there, and there. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Wolves who'd been beaten down, used up, discarded by a system that valued strength over everything else. Just like her. The 3 generals were brought out next, each chained to their stake. They looked worse than she'd expected, bruised, bloodied, barely able to stand, but their eyes were alert, tracking everything. Kael's gaze found hers. Through the bond, he asked, "Now?" "Not yet. Wait for my signal." Darius appeared on a balcony overlooking the courtyard. He was dressed in ceremonial armor, silver and black, designed to catch the torchlight and make him look untouchable. "Citizens of Thornhold," his voice boomed across the courtyard. "You're here to witness justice. These 4 stood against your king. They betrayed their oaths. They spread corruption and chaos, and now they will pay the price." The crowd was silent. Not agreement, just fear. At dawn, they will be executed, and their deaths will remind you all. There is no power greater than the Alpha's will, no bond stronger than your loyalty to this citadel. He gestured to a guard. Bring the silver blade. A sword was presented, pure silver, etched with runes meant to prevent healing. One cut from that, and even an alpha would die. Darius descended to the courtyard, the crowd parting before him like water. He approached the platform, the sword gleaming in his hand. "I'll start with the runt," he said. "Let her watch her bonded die first. Let her feel every death through those precious connections." He raised the sword toward Kael. Rhea reached out through the bonds and pulled. Not from the 17 wolves in the wildlands, not from her 3 generals. From everyone. Every wolf in the courtyard. Every soldier. Every servant. Every scared, angry, resentful soul who'd ever been cast aside by Darius's regime. She forced the bonds open. The courtyard exploded with psychic energy. Wolves screamed, some collapsed. Others grabbed their heads, overwhelmed by the sudden connection flooding their minds. Darius stumbled, the sword falling from his grip. "What?" Rhea spoke, and her voice echoed through every bond simultaneously, reaching hundreds of minds at once. "You've been told you're weak, that you're worthless, that the only thing that matters is power and dominance and blind obedience. But it's a lie." She could feel them now. All of them, their thoughts and fears and desperate hopes tangled with her own. The bonds weren't clean like the ones she'd formed carefully. They were raw, forced, painful, but they held. "You're not weak. You're survivors. Every one of you has endured things that would break lesser wolves. You've lived under a tyrant who treats you like tools to be used and thrown away. And you've had enough." Through the network, she felt resistance, confusion, but also recognition, because she was right, and they knew it. "I'm offering you a choice, the same choice I offered the rogues in the wildlands. Join me. Not because you have to, not because you're forced, but because you choose to. Because together, we can tear down everything that's kept you in chains." Darius was shouting orders, but his soldiers weren't moving. They were too overwhelmed by the bonds, by feeling hundreds of other minds pressed against their own. "Or," Rhea continued, "you can stay loyal to a king who would kill you without hesitation the moment you stopped being useful. The choice is yours." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the young soldier near the back, the one who'd been shaking, dropped his spear. The female servant stepped forward, and like a dam breaking, dozens more moved. They didn't attack. They didn't fight. They just chose. The bond solidified. One by one by one. 50, 100, more. Each new bond added strength to the network, and Rhea pulled power from them all, cycling it back out in the pattern Mira had taught her. The energy built, amplified, became something sustainable. The silver chains around her wrists shattered. She stood, her whole body blazing with channeled power, and the courtyard fell silent. Darius backed away, his face twisted with disbelief. "This isn't possible. You can't—" "I just did." Rhea gestured, and the chains holding her 3 generals exploded into fragments. They stumbled forward, free, and she caught them with the bond, pushing healing energy through the connections until they could stand on their own. "Kill her!" Darius screamed at his remaining soldiers. "Kill them all!" Maybe half the soldiers moved to obey. The others stood frozen, torn between ingrained loyalty and the new bonds pulling them in a different direction. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Bonded soldiers threw down their weapons. Unbonded soldiers attacked. Servants scattered. The carefully ordered execution became a full-scale battle in seconds. Kael shifted first, his wolf form lean and furious. He tore into the nearest attacking soldier with savage efficiency. Brig followed, his massive form crushing 2 soldiers under his weight. Soren stayed human, his blades flashing as he moved through the chaos like a ghost. And Rhea stood at the center of it all, directing the bonded wolves through the network. She could feel every position, every thought, every move. It was overwhelming and perfect, and she'd never felt so alive. A soldier came at her with a silver blade. She caught his wrist, twisted, and sent power through the forced bond. His mind went blank for a moment, not destroyed, just paused. "Choose," she told him. He dropped the weapon and ran. Another came, and another. She met each one, offering the same choice. Fight or join? More chose to join than she'd expected. The tide was turning. Darius's loyal soldiers were being overwhelmed, not by superior strength, but by simple numbers. For everyone who fell, 2 more bonded wolves took their place. Darius saw it happening. saw his carefully constructed power structure crumbling in real time. He shifted. His wolf form was enormous, black and silver with eyes like ice. This was the alpha who'd ruled through fear and violence for 20 years. This was the wolf who'd rejected her and left her to die. He charged straight at Rhea. She didn't move. Instead, she pulled every ounce of power the network could provide and met him head on. They collided in the center of the courtyard, two opposing forces crashing together. Darius's raw strength against Rhea's networked power. He was stronger individually, faster, more experienced, but she had an army in her head. Every bonded wolf fed her strength. Every connection shared skills, Kael's speed, Brig's power, Soren's precision, and beyond them, the collective will of hundreds of wolves who decided they were done being afraid. Rhea's form shifted. Not fully wolf, but something between, enhanced, changed by the power flowing through her. She caught Darius's jaws as they snapped at her throat, holding them apart through sheer force of will. His claws raked her sides, but the wounds healed almost instantly, power drawn from the network faster than he could damage her. "You can't win," she said, her voice doubled by the bond echoing through every connected mind. "You're one wolf. I'm hundreds." Darius's eyes widened with understanding and fear. She drove her fist into his chest, putting the strength of the entire network behind the blow. Something cracked. He flew backwards, slamming into the stone platform hard enough to shatter it. When he tried to rise, Rhea was already there. She grabbed him by the throat, human hand on wolf throat, and lifted him off the ground. The courtyard went silent, every eye on them. "You taught me that the weak deserve what they get," Rhea said quietly. "That strength is the only thing that matters. That power justifies everything." Darius struggled, but weakly. She could feel his strength fading. "You were wrong." She could kill him. It would be easy. The network pulsed with the desire for it, hundreds of wolves who'd suffered under his rule wanting justice, but that would make her just like him. Instead, she threw him to the ground and severed every bond he'd ever formed, cutting him off from pack and power and everything that had made him king. "You're exiled," she said, "alone, just like you made me. Let's see how you survive." Darius lay there gasping, suddenly just a man. Not a king, not an alpha. Nobody. The remaining loyal soldiers saw it happen, saw their king broken and cast down. One by one, they dropped their weapons. The battle was over. Rhea stood in the center of the courtyard, her bonded wolves gathering around her. Hundreds of them now. The network hummed with shared consciousness, shared purpose. She looked up at the balcony where Darius had stood minutes before. The space was empty now. "The old order is done," she said, her voice carrying through the bond to every connected mind. "No more kings, no more hierarchy built on fear. From now on, we choose our own path." A cheer went up from the bonded wolves. Not everyone. Some were still processing what had just happened. But enough. More than enough. Kyle appeared beside her, shifted back to human form, blood streaking his skin. "What now?" Rhea looked at the citadel walls, at the wolves filling the courtyard, at the dawn just beginning to break over the horizon. "Now we rebuild. Everything." The next hours were chaos of a different kind. The citadel had to be secured. Loyalist soldiers who refused to stand down had to be contained but not killed. The unbonded wolves who chose to leave were allowed to go. Rhea wouldn't force anyone to stay. But more chose to stay than leave. By midday, nearly 500 wolves had bonded with her. The network was so vast now that Rhea had to create subgroups just to manage it, delegating control to Kael, Brig, and Soren, who each commanded sections of the whole. They found the lower cells where Darius had kept prisoners, wolves deemed too weak or too rebellious. Rhea freed everyone and offered them the bond. Most accepted. Rask arrived that evening with the settlement wolves who'd survived. He took one look at Rhea standing on the citadel steps, surrounded by hundreds of bonded wolves, and laughed. "I'll be damned. You actually did it." "Did you doubt me?" "Completely. But I'm glad to be wrong." He sobered. "We lost 11 in the escape. The hunters got them before they could reach safe ground." Rhea felt the grief hit her through the bonds. 11 lives she'd failed to save. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. They died fighting. That's more than they would have gotten under Darius." He looked around at the transformed citadel. So what's the plan? You're in charge now? No one's in charge. That's the point. Someone has to make decisions. Then we all make them. Together. Through the network. Rhea could feel the bonds pulsing with hundreds of different opinions, fears, hopes. It won't be easy. It probably won't even work half the time. But it's better than one wolf deciding the fate of thousands. Rask studied her for a long moment. You know there'll be other kings, other citadels. They're not going to like what you've built here. Let them come. We'll be ready. That night, Rhea stood on the highest tower of the citadel, looking out over the territory that had once belonged to Darius Thorn. Through the bonds, she could feel the 500 wolves settling in below. Some were sleeping. Some were talking, getting to know each other. Some were on patrol, watching for threats. But they were all connected, all part of something new. Kale found her there. You should rest. You've been awake for 2 days straight. Can't. Too much to do. The network can survive a few hours without you micromanaging it. She smiled. I'm not micromanaging. I'm just listening. He stood beside her, quiet for a moment. Then, what you did today. The psychic explosion, the mass bonding, breaking Darius with your bare hands. That was terrifying? I was going to say incredible. But, yes, also terrifying. Rhea looked at him. Are you afraid of me? A little, he admitted. You're powerful in a way that shouldn't exist. You could control all of us if you wanted to. Override our wills, turn us into puppets. I would never... I know. That's why I'm only a little afraid instead of a lot. He met her eyes. You had every reason to become just like him, to take power, and never let go. But you didn't. You gave us all a choice. It's the only choice that matters. Brig and Soren joined them on the tower. Both looked exhausted but satisfied. The eastern wing is secure, Brig reported. All the prisoners have been freed and processed. Most bonded. A few chose to leave. The armory is locked down, Soren added, and I've posted bonded guards on every entrance. No one gets in or out without us knowing. Good. Rhea took a breath. Tomorrow we start restructuring. No more hierarchy. No more ranks. We form councils, rotating leadership, shared decision-making through the network. The traditionalists won't like that, Kyle warned. The traditionalists can adapt or leave. Their choice. Through the bonds, she felt acknowledgement from hundreds of minds. Not everyone agreed. Some were uncomfortable with how fast things were changing, but they were all willing to try. That was enough. There's one more thing, Soren said quietly. Darius? He's still in the cells. What do we do with him? Rhea had been avoiding that question all day. The truth was, she didn't know. Killing him would be easy. Keeping him prisoner went against everything she was trying to build. We let him go. All three men stared at her. Are you serious? Brig asked. He'll come back. He'll raise an army, attack us. Maybe. Or maybe he'll spend the rest of his life as a broken, powerless exile. Either way, his fate is his own. Rhea turned to face them fully. I won't kill him. I won't imprison him, because the moment I do that, I become exactly what I'm fighting against. That's idealistic, Kale said carefully. It's necessary. If we're going to be different, we have to actually be different, not just in words. Soren nodded slowly. I'll have him escorted to the border at dawn, far enough that he can't make it back easily. Thank you. The sun was rising over the frontier, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. From the tower, Rhea could see for miles, the wildlands stretching endlessly in every direction, dotted with settlements and territories and citadels that didn't know yet what had happened here. But they would, soon. Word would spread. A conduit had risen, the old order had fallen, and something new had taken its place. What do you think they'll call us? Brig asked, following her gaze. The other citadels, when they hear what happened? Rhea considered. Probably traitors, rebels, threats to everything they've built. And are we? She smiled. Absolutely. Through the network, she felt 500 wolves acknowledge her words. Not with fear, with pride. They were outcasts, rejects. The wolves the system had thrown away. And they were going to change everything. The first challenge came 3 days later. Rhea was in what used to be the throne room, now stripped of its elevated platform and converted into a council chamber with circular seating when the bond flared with alarm. Visitors at the south gate, Soren's voice cut through the network. 3 alphas, and they brought armies. Through the bond, Rhea saw what he saw. 3 massive forces arrayed outside the citadel walls, easily 1,000 wolves total. The alphas stood at the front, and even from a distance she could feel their power radiating like heat. Kael appeared at her side. That's Valdris from the Iron Mountains, Sarah from the Ashland Territories, and Morik from the Frost Reaches, 3 of the most powerful citadels in the frontier. What do they want? To talk, apparently. They're requesting an audience. His jaw tightened. Or it's a trap. Rhea reached out through the network, feeling the 500 bonded wolves scattered throughout the citadel. They were nervous, ready to fight, but holding steady. Let them in, she said. Just the alphas. No weapons, no guards. Are you insane? Briggs' voice came through the bond from wherever he was stationed. They could kill you the moment they're inside. They could try, but I don't think that's why they're here. 20 minutes later, the 3 alphas stood in the council chamber. All of them were older than Darius had been, scarred from decades of holding power. Valdris was built like a mountain himself, gray-haired and stone-faced. Sarah was lean and sharp as a knife, her eyes missing nothing. Morik looked like he'd been carved from ice, pale and cold. Rhea sat in the circle with them, Kael, Brigg, and Soren flanking her. She'd deliberately chosen not to sit higher or apart. Everyone was equal here. Valdris spoke first, his voice like grinding rocks. You've made quite a mess, girl. I prefer Rhea, and I cleaned up a mess, actually. Darius's mess. By overthrowing the natural order, by creating bonds that shouldn't exist, by turning loyal wolves against their king, Sarah leaned forward. Do you understand what you've done? The precedent you've set? I freed wolves who were being used and discarded. I gave them a choice. Choice. Morik's laugh was bitter. You forced bonds with hundreds of wolves simultaneously. Some of them are still recovering from the psychic trauma. That's not choice. That's violence. Rhea felt the accusation like a slap, partly because it was true. The mass bonding in the courtyard had been brutal, forced, necessary, but not gentle. You're right, she said quietly. What I did in the courtyard was violent. I forced connections that should have formed naturally. Some wolves are still suffering from it. She met each alpha's eyes in turn. But I also offered every single one of them the chance to sever the bond afterward, to walk away. And you know how many took that option? How many? Valdris asked. 17 out of 563. Rhea let that sink in. The rest chose to stay, even knowing what I'd done. Even with the trauma, they chose this over what they had before. Silence filled the chamber. That doesn't change the fundamental problem, Sarah said. You've created a network that allows one wolf to control hundreds. That's more dangerous than any king we've ever seen. I'm not controlling them. I'm connected to them. There's a difference. Is there? Can you prove it? Rhea stood and opened herself fully to the network, letting the bonds blaze visible through psychic resonance. All 3 alphas flinched, feeling the edges of it. Watch, she said. Through the network, she posed a question to every bonded wolf. Should we allow these 3 alphas to leave peacefully, or should we detain them as threats? The responses flooded back instantly. Some wanted detention, some wanted peace, some were undecided, but they were all individual voices, all making their own choices. Rhea showed the alphas the responses through the bond connection. I don't control them. I can feel them, guide them, share strength with them. But they think for themselves. They choose for themselves. Then you're weaker than a traditional pack, Morik said. Decisions by committee, chaos instead of order. You'll fall apart the moment you face real pressure. Maybe, or maybe we'll be stronger because we're not held together by fear. Valdris stood, his massive frame towering over the seated circle. You haven't answered the real question. What do you want, Rhea Varen? Why did you do all this? Rhea thought about it, about the courtyard and the rejection and the pain that had nearly killed her, about running through the wild lands, hunted and desperate, about the moment she'd decided to stop running and start fighting back. I want every wolf who's been called weak or worthless or a runt to know they're not. I want a world where you don't have to be the strongest or the most vicious to survive. I want to tear down the systems that made wolves like Darius possible in the first place. That's rebellion, Sarah said flatly. No, that's revolution. The three alphas exchanged looks. You're asking us to stand by while you dismantle everything we've built, Valdris said. I'm not asking for anything. You came here. What do you want? Another silence, heavier this time. Finally, Mork spoke. We want to know if you're going to come for our citadels next. If you're going to try to spread this network by force. I'm not going to force anyone, but if wolves come to me asking for bonds, asking to join, I won't turn them away. Rhea met his icy gaze. And if you try to stop them, if you punish wolves just for wanting something different, then yes, I'll come for you. That's a declaration of war, Sarah said. That's a promise of protection. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Through the network, Rhea felt her bonded wolves preparing for violence, felt Kael's hand moving toward his weapon, felt Soren calculating attack vectors. Then Valdris did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a deep, genuine sound that seemed to shake the walls. You've got spine, girl. I'll give you that. It's Rhea. Rhea, he corrected, still chuckling. You remind me of someone. My daughter, actually. She died 20 years ago in a challenge for alpha status. Wasn't strong enough to win, wasn't weak enough to survive losing. His expression sobered. She would have loved what you're building here. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be. It was the system working as intended. But maybe... He looked at the other two alphas. Maybe the system is the problem. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You're not suggesting... I'm suggesting we watch. We wait. We see if this experiment of hers actually works. Valdris turned back to Rhea. You get 1 year. Prove you can maintain this network without it collapsing into chaos. Prove wolves can choose their own way without everything falling apart. Do that, and we'll consider treaties. And if I fail, then we come back with our armies and restore order, the traditional way. It wasn't an alliance, but it wasn't war either. It was a chance. 1 year, Rhea agreed. The three alphas left without ceremony. Their armies withdrew from the citadel walls, pulling back to neutral territory but not disbanding. Kael watched them go from the tower. They're going to watch everything we do, every mistake, every failure. They're waiting for us to fall apart. Then we don't fall apart. Easier said than done. You've got 500 wolves with different opinions, different backgrounds, different needs. How do you keep that unified? We don't. Rhea joined him at the railing. Unity isn't the goal. Connection is. They don't have to agree on everything. They just have to trust each other enough to work through the disagreements. And if they can't, then Valdris was right, and this was all a mistake. She felt the network pulsing in her chest, hundreds of individual threads woven together. But I don't think it is. The next months tested that belief to its absolute limit. Integrating 500 wolves from wildly different backgrounds turned out to be exponentially harder than overthrowing a tyrant. The bonded wolves argued constantly, about everything from food distribution to guard rotations to what to do with Darius's old throne. Rhea spent more time mediating disputes than sleeping. The network helped, allowing instant communication across the entire citadel, but it also meant everyone's grievances flooded her consciousness constantly. Some wolves wanted stricter rules, others wanted complete freedom. Some wanted to rebuild the hierarchy with Rhea at the top. Others rejected any form of leadership entirely. It was messy, chaotic, exhausting, but it was also working. Slowly, structures emerged, not hierarchies, but networks of cooperation. Wolves with similar skills formed groups, hunters, builders, healers. They rotated leadership weekly, shared knowledge freely, made decisions collectively. The energy cycle that Mira had taught Rhea became the foundation of everything. Power flowed constantly through the network, never pooling in one place, always moving. When someone was injured, strength flooded to them from dozens of sources. When someone was exhausted, others carried their burden. It was inefficient compared to a traditional pack. But it was resilient in ways traditional packs could never be. 2 months in, a group of unbonded wolves from a collapsed citadel appeared at the gates. 50 of them, Refugees fleeing violence, looking for sanctuary. Ria offered them the bond. 20 accepted immediately. The other 30 wanted to wait, to see if this place was real before committing. She let them stay anyway. Word spread. More refugees came. Then deserters from other citadels, sick of the constant challenges and power struggles. Then exiles who'd been cast out for being too weak or too different. The network grew to 700, then 800, then 1,000. The citadel had to expand. Wolves built new structures in the surrounding forest, connected by paths and communication networks. What had been a single fortress became a sprawling settlement, and with growth came new problems. Some of the newer bonds were unstable. Wolves who'd lived under harsh hierarchies struggled with the concept of shared decision-making. Conflicts erupted. Twice, bonds had to be severed when wolves couldn't adapt. But the core held. The original 500, the ones who'd been there from the beginning, maintained stability even as everything around them changed. Kael, Brig, and Soren became unofficial leaders, not through rank, but through respect. They each commanded sections of the network, handling day-to-day operations while Ria focused on the bigger picture. 6 months after the revolution, a messenger arrived from Valdris. "The Iron Mountain Citadel has fallen," he reported. "Not through conquest, through choice. Half my wolves asked to bond with you. I could have fought them, but—" He shook his head. "I'm tired, Ria. Tired of holding power through fear. Tired of watching wolves I've known for decades tear each other apart for scraps of authority." "What are you asking for?" "A bond. If you'll have me." Ria stared at him. Valdris was one of the most powerful alphas in the frontier. Having him in the network would legitimize everything she was building, but it would also make her a threat to every other alpha still holding on to the old ways. "You understand what this means," she said. "The other citadels will see this as an act of war." "Let them. I'd rather fight for something that matters than maintain something that doesn't." She offered her hand. "Then welcome." The bond formed instantly, powerful and stable. Valdris gasped as the network opened to him, showing him the minds of 1,000 wolves all connected, all sharing strength. "This is incredible," he breathed. "I never imagined—" "It gets easier. And harder. Sometimes both at once." He laughed. "I believe it." With Valdris came 300 more wolves from the Iron Mountains. The network swelled to 1,300. Other citadels noticed. Sarah came next, 3 months later. Then a dozen smaller alphas, each bringing their packs. Not all at once. Some took weeks to decide. Some brought only parts of their forces, while others stayed behind to maintain territories. But the momentum was undeniable. 1 year after the revolution, Ria stood on the Citadel Tower and looked out at what they'd built. The original fortress had transformed into a city, not built on hierarchy or fear, but on cooperation and shared purpose. Wolves from a dozen different citadels lived and worked together, connected through bonds that transcended old tribal loyalties. The network had grown to over 3,000 wolves. It wasn't perfect. Disputes still happened. Some bonds failed. Wolves still died from accidents, illness, old age. The energy cycle sometimes became unstable when too many wolves drew power simultaneously. But it worked. Against all odds, it actually worked. Morik was the last holdout. He arrived alone, his citadel already dissolved, his wolves scattered to other networks. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I thought strength meant standing alone, being untouchable, unbreakable." He looked tired, older than when Ria had first met him. "But you've shown me something different, strength through connection, through vulnerability, through trust. It's not easy. Nothing worth doing is." He met her eyes. "I'd like to join. If you'll have me." Ria offered the bond, and Morik became the last of the original 3 alphas to join the network. That night, the entire settlement celebrated. Wolves gathered in the central courtyard, the same courtyard where Darius had rejected her, where she'd nearly died, and shared food, stories, laughter. Ria moved through the crowd, feeling the bond's pulse with joy and connection. She stopped to talk with wolves she'd freed from cells, wolves who'd fled from violence, wolves who'd chosen this path because they believed in something better. Rask found her near the edge of the gathering. "Never thought I'd see the day. 3,000 wolves, all bonded, all choosing to be here." "Did you doubt me again?" "Always." He grinned. "But I'm glad to be wrong." Again, Lissa approached, the old female wolf who'd been one of the first to bond back in the settlement. The council wants to know what happens now. We've accomplished what seemed impossible. Where do we go from here? It was a good question. They'd torn down the old system, built something new. But for what purpose? Rhea thought about the runt she'd been a year ago, dying in the rain, rejected and alone. She thought about every wolf who'd been called worthless, every life crushed under the weight of a system that valued strength over everything else. We spread, she said, not through conquest, through choice. We open our borders to anyone who wants something different. We build connections with other settlements, other territories. We prove that there's another way to live. Some will resist, Soren said, joining them. Some alphas will see us as a threat and attack. Then we defend ourselves. But we don't attack first. We don't force anyone to join. We just exist and let our existence challenge everything they think they know about power. Through the network, she felt acknowledgement from 3,000 minds. Not uniform agreement. There were still debates, still disagreements about tactics and strategy, but a shared commitment to the core idea. They were building something that had never existed before, a pack not bound by territory or bloodline or hierarchy. A network of wolves who chose each other day after day because they believed in what they were creating together. Kyle appeared beside her, watching the celebration. You know historians are going to write about this. The runt who overthrew a king, the conduit who changed the frontier. I hope they get it right. What do you mean? I hope they write about all of us, not just me. About Brig and Soren and you. About Rask and Lisa and Valdris and every single wolf who chose to join. Because this isn't about one person. It never was. Tell that to the 3,000 wolves who bonded with you specifically. Rhea smiled. They didn't bond with me because I'm special. They bonded because I gave them what everyone wants, a choice, a chance to be part of something bigger than themselves without losing themselves in the process. The celebration continued into the early morning. Wolves danced, sang, shared stories of where they'd come from and what they hoped to build. The network pulsed with warmth and connection and genuine joy. But as dawn approached, Rhea felt something else through the bonds. A flicker of warning from the wolves on patrol. She found Brig near the eastern gate. What is it? Messenger from the Shadow Peak Citadel. Says their alpha wants to meet. Alone. Shadow Peak? Rhea searched her memory. That's one of the largest citadels still operating under the old system. One of the harshest, too. Alpha Kristoff rules through absolute terror, makes Darius look gentle by comparison. Brig's expression was grim. This could be a trap. Or it could be a genuine attempt at dialogue. You can't possibly trust. I don't. But I have to at least listen. She agreed to meet Kristoff at neutral ground, a clearing halfway between their territories. She brought Kyle, Brig, and Soren, plus 20 bonded wolves as a precaution. Kristoff arrived with an equal number of guards. He was massive, even for an alpha, with scars covering every visible inch of skin and eyes like chips of black ice. So you're the conduit, he said without preamble. The one tearing down everything our ancestors built. I'm Rhea Varen, and I'm offering an alternative, not tearing anything down. You've corrupted over half the citadels in the frontier, turned loyal wolves against their alphas, spread weakness and chaos disguised as choice. His voice was cold. I'm here to give you one chance to stop before this becomes a real war. I'm not stopping, and I'm not forcing anyone. Wolves come to me because they want to. Because you manipulate them with your bonds, control their minds. I don't control anyone. The bonds are consensual, two-way, equal. Kristoff's laugh was harsh. There's no such thing as equal bonds. Someone always has more power, and in your network, that someone is you. You're wrong. Prove it. Sever your bonds right now. Walk away from your network and see how long it survives without you. The challenge hung in the air. Through the network, Rhea felt alarm from her bonded wolves. Kael's hand moved to his weapon. You want me to prove the network doesn't need me by abandoning it? Rhea said slowly. That's not proof. That's sabotage. It's the only way to know if what you've built is real or just another form of tyranny with a prettier face. He had a point. Rhea had spent a year building the network, maintaining it, guiding it. She'd never considered what would happen if she simply left. If I sever the bonds, she said, thousands of wolves lose their connection, their shared strength. Some might die from the shock. Then your network is just as fragile as I thought. Or maybe you're just trying to destroy something that threatens your power. Christoph's eyes narrowed. I'm trying to protect the frontier from collapse. Your experiment is doomed to fail. Better it fails now than after it spreads even further. Why are you really here? Rhea asked. If you just wanted to challenge me, you could have attacked. But you asked for a meeting. Why? For the first time, something flickered in Christoph's expression. Not quite uncertainty, but close. Because I've lost 30 wolves this month alone. All of them left to join your network, including my daughter. His voice dropped. She told me I was a tyrant, that she'd rather risk everything with you than spend one more day under my rule. There it was. The real reason. I'm sorry, Rhea said quietly. I know what it's like to be rejected by someone you care about. I don't want your pity. I want to know if you're worth what she's sacrificing to follow you. I can't answer that. Only she can. Then let me see. Let me into your network. Show me what's so compelling that wolves are willing to abandon everything they've known. It was a trap. It had to be. Once inside the network, Christoph could potentially attack from within, disrupting the bonds, causing chaos. But it was also an opportunity. Kael, Rhea said through the bond, what do you think? It's dangerous. But if we can bring Shadowpeak into the network, that's almost 1,000 more wolves. Worth the risk. She turned to Christoph. I'll show you. But understand, once you're in, you'll feel everything. Every thought, every emotion, all 3,000 minds connected. It can be overwhelming. I can handle it, Rhea offered her hand. Christoph took it. The bond formed, and Christoph gasped. She'd been gentle with most bondings, easing wolves into the network gradually. But with Christoph, she opened it all at once, showed him everything. 3,000 minds, all thinking, feeling, choosing simultaneously. The energy cycle flowing between them like a living river. The conflicts and resolutions. The shared joys and sorrows. The absolute absence of forced obedience or fear-based control. It was beautiful and messy and chaotic, and it worked. Christoph's knees buckled. Rhea caught him, keeping the bond open, letting him feel it all. He couldn't finish the sentence. Real, Rhea supplied. It's real. And it's nothing like what you've been told. She showed him specific moments through the bond. Wolves making decisions collectively. Disputes resolved through consensus. Power flowing freely to whoever needed it most. And underlying it all, the simple truth that every single wolf in the network was there by choice. When she finally pulled back, Christoph was trembling. My daughter, he said hoarsely. She's in there. I can feel her. She's safe. Happy, I think. You can talk to her through the bond if you want. Christoph stood silent for a long moment. Then, what I've built at Shadowpeak. Everything I thought was strength. It's just fear, isn't it? Not just fear, control too. Isolation. Making wolves dependent on you so they can't imagine existing without you. And you're different? I'm trying to be. I fail sometimes, but I'm trying. Christoph looked at his guards, then back at Rhea. If I join your network, if I bring Shadowpeak's wolves, what happens to me? You become one of thousands, equal, connected. Your voice matters, but no more than anyone else's. I've been alpha for 35 years. I know, and giving that up will be the hardest thing you've ever done. He was quiet for a long time. Through the bond, Rhea could feel him wrestling with it. Decades of conditioning telling him to fight, to dominate, to never show weakness, versus the undeniable proof that there was another way. Finally, he spoke. I want to talk to my daughter first. Through the bond. Will you show me how? Rhea guided him through the connection, showing him how to find specific threads in the network. When he found his daughter's presence, she heard his sharp intake of breath. What passed between them was private. Rhea pulled back, giving them space. When Christoph returned his attention to the present, his eyes were wet. She says I've changed, that she can feel it through the bond, that I'm already different than I was 10 minutes ago. He looked at Rhea with something like wonder. Is that what this does? Changes us? It shows us what we could be, what we are when we're not trying to control everything. Kristoff held out his hand. Shadow Peak joins the network, not because I'm forcing them, because I'm choosing this. And I'll trust them to make their own choices. The bond solidified, stronger than before. And through it, Rhea felt Shadow Peak's wolves, all 900 of them, as Kristoff opened the connection to his entire citadel. Not all of them joined immediately. Some were confused, some resisted, but most felt the change in their alpha and chose to follow. By sunset, the network held 4,700 wolves. The frontier would never be the same. 3 years after the revolution, Rhea stood in what had once been Thornhold Citadel and was now simply called the Heart. The fortress had been transformed beyond recognition. Walls had been torn down, replaced with open structures that flowed into the surrounding forest. What had been a monument to power and domination was now a living, breathing community where wolves from across the frontier came to learn, to connect, to grow. The network had spread to 23 former citadels. Over 12,000 wolves were bonded, sharing strength and knowledge and purpose. It wasn't perfect. Bonds still failed sometimes. Wolves still argued, still struggled, still made mistakes. The energy cycle sometimes became unstable under extreme stress. And there were still alphas in the far reaches of the frontier who viewed the network as an existential threat. But it endured. Rhea was different too. The constant connection to thousands of minds had changed her in ways she was still discovering. She was stronger, yes, but also more vulnerable, more aware of pain and joy and everything in between. She rarely slept. The network didn't need her to micromanage anymore. It had developed its own rhythms, its own methods of self-regulation. But she still felt responsible for every wolf connected to her. Kale found her on the tower at dawn, watching the sun rise over the settlement. "You're thinking too much again," he said. "Someone has to." "No, they don't. That's the whole point of the network. Shared burden, shared everything." He stood beside her. "You need to rest. Actually rest. When was the last time you let yourself disconnect for more than an hour?" "I can't. If I disconnect, the whole thing might—" "It won't. We've tested it. Remember 3 months ago when you got sick? You were unconscious for 2 days and the network held perfectly." He was right. She'd been so focused on maintaining everything that she'd forgotten to trust what they'd built. "Okay," she said, "I'll try." She closed her eyes and gradually released her tight control over the network. It was terrifying at first, like stepping off a cliff. But the bonds held. The energy cycle continued flowing. Wolves across the entire network continued making decisions, solving problems, living their lives. They didn't need her to hold their hands, they just needed her to be part of the network. Not above it. Part of it. Rhea felt something loosen in her chest. A tension she'd been carrying for 3 years finally releasing. "Better?" Kale asked. "Yeah, better." Brig and Soren joined them on the tower. It had become their ritual, the 4 of them gathering at dawn, checking in, making sure they were all still functional. "The Southern Territories want to send ambassadors," Brig reported. 3 citadels that haven't joined the network yet but want to establish trade relations. That's progress. Or reconnaissance, Soren added. They could be gathering information for an attack. Or they could genuinely want peace. We won't know unless we let them try. Through the network, Rhea felt the consensus forming. Most wolves supported opening dialogue with the Southern Territories. A minority wanted to remain isolated, protected. But the majority view won. That was how it worked now, not through her decree, but through collective decision. "Approve the ambassadors," she said. "Full access to the settlement. Show them everything. If they choose to attack after seeing what we've built, at least they'll know exactly what they're destroying." The ambassadors arrived 2 weeks later. They walked through the heart with visible disbelief, watching wolves from a dozen different territories working together, sharing resources, making decisions collectively. One of them, an older female alpha named Saren, pulled Rhea aside. "This shouldn't work," she said bluntly. "Everything I know about pack dynamics says this should have collapsed into chaos within months. It almost did, multiple times. But it didn't. Why?" Rhea thought about it. "Because we decided that being right wasn't as important as being together. Because we're willing to fail and learn and try again. Because no one here is trying to be perfect. We're just trying to be better than we were. Saren studied her for a long moment. My territory has problems. Wolves are unhappy. I've tried to rule fairly, but there's always dissent, always challenges. I'm tired of fighting my own people. Then stop fighting. Join us. Just like that? Just like that. It's a choice. That's all it's ever been. Saren looked out over the settlement, at the thousands of wolves moving with purpose and connection. If I join, what happens to my authority, my position? You become one of thousands. Your experience and wisdom will be valued, but you won't rule anymore. You'll be part of something bigger. That's terrifying. I know. Saren took a deep breath. Let me talk to my wolves first, see if they want this. If they choose to join, I'll bring them. That's all I can ask. The 3 ambassadors left. 2 weeks later, Saren returned with 800 wolves, all ready to bond. The network grew to 13,600. 5 years after the revolution, Rhea stood in the same courtyard where Darius had rejected her and watched as wolves from across the entire frontier gathered for the first annual assembly. It had been Valdris's idea, a massive gathering where bonded wolves could meet in person, share stories, address problems collectively. Over 10,000 had come, filling the heart and the surrounding forest. Rhea walked through the crowd, feeling the bonds pulse with excitement and connection. She stopped to talk with wolves she'd freed from cells, wolves who'd fled from violence, wolves who'd chosen this path because they believed in something better. A young wolf approached her nervously. Are you really the one? The runt who overthrew the Alpha King? Rhea smiled. I'm Rhea, and I didn't do it alone. But you started it. You proved that someone like me, someone small, someone weak, could matter. You always mattered. You just needed to believe it. Young Wolf's eyes went wide. Then she grinned and ran off to tell her friends. Kale appeared beside Rhea. You've become a legend. You know that, right? I didn't want to be a legend. I just wanted to survive. Well, you did more than survive. You changed everything. He gestured to the massive gathering. 5 years ago, this would have been impossible. Now it's normal. Not normal, still extraordinary, but maybe someday it will be normal. That night, the assembly held a ceremony to honor the wolves who'd died building the network. Hundreds of names were spoken. Wolves who'd fallen in battles, who'd died from bond sickness, who'd sacrificed themselves to protect others. Rhea felt each loss through the network, a collection of absences that would never fully heal. But she also felt the lives that had been saved. The thousands who'd found homes, purpose, connection. The children born into the network who would never know the fear and violence of the old system. The balance was positive, barely, but enough. As the ceremony ended and wolves began to disperse, Rhea found herself alone on the platform. The same platform where she'd nearly died, where she'd discovered her power, where everything had changed. Soren joined her silently. Of all her bonded wolves, he understood best the weight of what they'd built. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Taking on this burden? Every day, Rhea admitted. But I'd do it again, all of it, because the alternative was dying alone in that cell. And at least this way I'm dying connected to thousands of wolves who chose to walk this path with me. You're not dying. We're all dying, slowly. The bonds take a toll. She touched her chest where the connections pulsed. Mira warned me. Most conduits don't live past 30. I'm 24. I can feel it already, the strain, the slow burning out. Then we find a way to fix it. The network has thousands of minds working on the problem. Someone will find an answer. Maybe. Or maybe this is just the cost of changing everything. Soren was quiet for a moment. Then, if you die, the network dies with you. You know that. No, it'll stumble, fracture. But it won't die because it's not about me anymore. It's about all of us. And even if the bonds sever when I'm gone, the idea will survive. The proof that there's another way. Through the network, she felt acknowledgement from thousands of minds. They'd been listening, and they understood. The next morning, Rhea woke to find a delegation of healers and researchers waiting outside her chambers. We've been working on something, the lead healer, a wolf named Denna, said. A way to distribute the conduit burden across multiple wolves. If we can teach others to maintain sections of the network, you won't have to carry all of it alone. Ria's heart leaped. Is that possible? We think so. It'll take time and training, but yes, we can evolve the network beyond dependency on a single conduit. Over the next year, they developed the technique. Ria taught 20 wolves how to maintain and monitor sections of the network, how to facilitate the energy cycle, how to handle bond formation and severance. It worked. The strain on Ria lessened dramatically. She could feel her body beginning to heal, the constant burning in her chest easing to a manageable warmth. But more importantly, the network became truly self-sustaining. No single point of failure, no irreplaceable component. It was everything she'd hoped for. 10 years after the revolution, Ria stood on a hill overlooking the Heart and watched the sun set over the frontier. The network now encompassed over 40 former citadels and 20,000 wolves. Trade routes connected territories that had been enemies for generations. Children grew up learning that bonds were choices, not obligations. And slowly, impossibly, the old system was fading into memory. There were still holdouts, still alphas clinging to power through fear, still territories where the old ways dominated, but they were shrinking, and the network was growing. Kale found her there, as he always did. They were older now, marked by a decade of constant struggle and triumph, but they were still here, still fighting. The council approved the expansion into the Western territories, he said. 3 more citadels want to join. That'll bring us to almost 25,000. Crazy, isn't it? I remember when it was just 4 of us running through the forest, thinking we'd be dead by morning. Ria laughed. We should have been. By every reasonable measure, we should have died a dozen times over. But we didn't, because you taught us that impossible just means no one's tried hard enough yet. Through the network, Ria felt the pulse of 20,000 wolves, each one unique, each one choosing to be part of something larger than themselves. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real. And it was theirs. Brig and Soren joined them on the hill. The 4 original bonds, still connected after all these years, still fighting for the world they'd decided to build. What do you think happens next? Brig asked. We've changed the frontier, but there are other lands beyond the mountains. Other territories we haven't reached. Then we reach them, Ria said simply. Not through conquest, through connection. We show them what's possible and let them choose. And if they choose differently, then we respect that choice. We can't force everyone to believe in what we've built, but we can prove it's worth believing in. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and stars began to emerge. In the settlement below, lights flickered to life. Thousands of wolves gathering for the evening meal, sharing stories, building relationships. Ria had been a runt, a reject, a wolf who should have died in that courtyard 10 years ago. Instead, she'd become the center of something that changed the world. Not because she was strong, not because she was special, but because she'd been broken enough to imagine something different and brave enough to build it. Through the network, she felt the acknowledgement of 20,000 wolves, not worship, not obedience, just connection, choice, trust. And that was enough. That was everything.